have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and strange.
Hello, Johnny, how are you today? And welcome to the wonderful and strange Twin Peaks Logcast.
Wait, am I Johnny?
I'm Kalil, and with me today is the beige chair to my red chair.
So basically, on the surface, we make no difference. And I, as the Unplugged Professor, am your odd equal in which no one can agree upon.
Today we're talking about Twin Peaks The Return, parts 9 and 10. Part 9, known colloquially as This is the Chair.
That
and
is
part
the chair.
10, known as Laura is the One.
There are multiple chairs, actually, in there. So I was thinking to myself, it's like that one chair, but then there's another chair, then there's another chair. So many chairs, but that was the chair.
If I was really astute, I would have counted every chair in that part. I should have done it.
You should have done it, but instead you have a handful of whooshes.
Now, between the red chair and the beige chair, which one do you think looked better?
No chair.
No chair?
Yeah, those were pricey. I don't want them.
Okay, ignoring the price. You get one as a gift.
How can you ignore the price?
You get it as a gift. You get it as a gift.
I get big chairs.
Yes, you choose which chair you want to receive as a gift.
Well, at that point, I guess, we have a beige couch there. We have a red chair.
Yep. So which one do you like?
I want them to Frankenstein the two together. They order both chairs, and then they stitch each halves together so that we can both share a red and
Why
beige
does this
chair.
have to be okay, I just like the red chair better.
Good.
There you go. That's my...
there you go.
It can be simple.
Good job. And no, never with me. Never with me.
So, previously off pod, Professor and I had a conversation that I want to relay before we get into the nitty-gritty of 9 and 10, because I thought it was just interesting and I want to share it. So, we were talking a bit, and by that I mean I was complaining a lot about The Return, and we were talking about this idea of the literal versus the metaphorical and how spiritual elements are handled in Twin Peaks, The Return versus the original. And a lot of this kind of came to my mind as I was thinking about the Bookhouse episodes I've been doing. First on the outside in walks with fire, and then secondly with Laura's ghost. This idea of people debating with Bob, for example, what percentage of Bob is a psychological phenomenon versus a supernatural element, or how much is it both? And I remember reading for that in Laura's Ghost that Jennifer Lynch, the author of The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, put it that she thinks of it as 70% psychological for Laura, that Laura is imagining it being Bob because it's a defense mechanism to protect her because the reality of it being her father is too much to handle. And that's where I agree. That's where the book seems to think it is. But then there are definitely things in The Return and other parts of that are more supernatural. So I just want to return to that conversation more in generally and also with specifically The Return. What do you think? If Jennifer Lynch said 70% is psychological, where are you at with psychological versus actual supernatural elements?
For The Return, specifically, or
for any of it.
Oh, for any
however
of it.
However you want to tackle it. Do you think it's noticeably different depending on what you're looking at, or when you think Twin Peaks? Yeah.
No, I think that with Twin Peaks, I would say that the thing that tackles spiritual more will be The Return, and the initial Twin Peaks is something that tackles more metaphorical. But you still kind of need both in order to juggle and balance things around, or elsewise things kind of get wishy-washy on how the characters are interacting, participating, or even outright disappearing from the general scenes. So, I think the biggest thing on display is probably how The Return handles the supernatural element, or at the very least opens it in a wide way, throws open the box, puts aside the lid, and just kind of lets the spiritual elements blend with reality. Everything with Mr. C going on, everything that seems to be coming along with Dougie and Cooper, Dougie Coop, and all the scenes that feature Philip Gerard and the Red Room. It's so much that, for better or for worse, I do like the atmosphere that's coming from The Return, but it does feel like instead of how everything's been built up in the TV series on this strange place where people snap around, dance, these people start to pop up and phase in, as opposed to everything else going on with the realm around Laura Palmer, that seems more mythical, and this seems more like a place that we visit. It feels more like the Red Room is a physical place one can visit in The Return, more than in the original Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me.
Right, and I think most of our conversation here is going to center around the original show versus the return, with maybe some Fire Walk with Me in the middle.
Yes.
I do want to just say, going back to the books for a second, I would say that the most, to me, of any Twin Peaks material that leans into the psychological and metaphorical rather than literal spiritual is The Secret Diary. That's the one where I'm most willing to say it's all in the characters' psyches. Rather than being actually a demon possession.
Which helps because of the format of the book.
Right. But then I would also say the flip side, maybe the most literal is another book, The Secret History of Twin Peaks. Because that one, it goes through great lengths to go through all of these different sightings, experiences, accounts, that it seems like this is trying to argue to you through the archivist's notes that this is a phenomenon happening to people with abductions, sightings, etc.
Especially with... Funnily enough, the other Dougie Milford story, especially including President Nixon.
So I would say both of those are the opposite ends of the spectrum, and both the show and the return are in the middle somewhere. I would just agree with you that the original show leans more toward the psychological, whereas the return leans more toward where Mark Frost's book is, just in a different kind of way. Now, with that, I'm thinking of season 1, The Red Room. We get it either in the extended international pilot or we get it in episode 2. And that is framed as a dream, right? That is framed as Dale Cooper as a dream. So it's totally up to the viewer when they're watching. How literally do you interpret any of that? Is that just Cooper's brain firing neurons? It's not a real place. It leaves it open to you.
Yes.
Then later we have The Giant. That is, again, something that Dale Cooper is seeing and imagining that even he later kind of says, oh man, I was so goofy last night, I imagined a giant. He's not even sure he believes it.
Yes.
Then at the end, the most literal you get, potentially, is at the end of season 2. And there's also the Bob taunting about Josie, what happened to Josie. But even at the end, at the end of season 2, they go into the curtains with Wyndham Earle, Annie, and Dale Cooper.
With Truman waiting outside.
Even this, I would argue, is still less literal than what we get in the return. Because yes, they go to a seeming a place of the curtains, but you could easily look at it as kind of a dual metaphor of someone going into the woods and having a spiritual journey, and it's Dale Cooper still going into his own mind.
Just like Jerry Horn. Sometimes you go into the forest and have a spiritual journey for yourself.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, we have Dougie Coop kind of being produced out of an outlet which everyone recognizes his whole new clothes, his new giant physique. We have the kind of like death and rebirth of Mr. C going on here. It very much feels like the Red Room is very much there alive and also bound to be met with other mythical natures on another layer beyond. Thanks to the Mauve Zone, in which the Mauve Zone ends up overshadowing the Red Room in a way.
Because I think you could make a pretty compelling read of the original show and just argue that all 3 of those Red Room scenes and Bob happening with Josie, those are all things happening to Cooper's psychology. And at the end of the season, he's doing an inward battle of his soul, where most of the things he sees in the Red Room, you could just argue are his fears, insecurities, doubts, memories, all playing against him. I think of the scene with like Caroline switching to Annie, switching to Caroline, back and forth, the blood on the floor, everything going on there. That could all be just Cooper's soul. And then you have things like Donna and Maddie seeing Bob. That can also be psychological.
Now, I want to make very clear here, the original Twin Peaks with that's a single viewing, but I think that's easier with the original Twin Peaks to have more of a slider on that.
Yes.
As opposed to the return.
I don't know how you can imagine it not being literal. Right? I don't know how you could look at, oh yeah, Mr. C's just a regular guy.
But I think it's just blending in and kind of like mixing the oil and the water, and somehow they are now coming together as one like briny blackness, which I do think that I'm enjoying that, but I can see where people can kind of look at it and feel a fair amount of dissonance from some appeals from the original Twin Peaks.
You and I were talking off pod that the Red Room feels so much more demystified. Part of it's because the Mauve Zone is there as a comparison.
Yes.
Part of it's because it just literally feels like a place you can just walk out of, go in. It's like an actual location. And the way that we phrased it, I can't remember which of us came up with it first.
It was me.
It was you, the professor, then, is that the Red Room just feels like a place where Philip Gerard lives.
Yes.
Like, it's just the place he hangs out, which is such a different sense than even in Fire Walk with Me. Laura being there at the end felt like it was either like an afterlife sort of idea or like her soul reaching peace. That's kind of where I lean, is that it isn't literally her spirit goes there when she dies. It's more that she experiences a form of peace at the end. But either way, it's still more like deeper than just a location.
It's something where in the original series, you would see the Red Room. It'd be so mysterious and strange. It's almost dancing on electricity until it eventually shocks you at the end when your hands get way too close to it. It's something that you are have to be cautious around in order to come out unscathed, but at the very least is still like a fun mystery. Meanwhile, it gets a lot less fun in Fire Walk With Me when it becomes an absolute horror house in which it is constantly torturing and
horror
taunting.
House, just to be clear what kind of house we're talking about here.
Laura Palmer, yes. And then finally with The Return, you could say that this is the advantage of the Red Room, that you can view it in different scopes, but it does very much become more of that literal space in The Return, thanks to multiple elements. But at the same time, I would still argue that the stronger forms of the Red Room come from the prior existing series. But that's because now I'm fully invested with this new toy to play with, the Mauve Zone. Which, is that the reason for the creation of the Mauve Zone for a writing perspective, or was an idea of a Mauve Zone already in the mind firsthand?
Well, that's the question, though, too, is the Mauve Zone, I think, is great atmosphere, great mood, there's a definite sense of ominous nature to it, but are we viewing it psychologically or literally?
Yes.
Because with the original show, again, season 2's finale, it was very unnerving when Dale Cooper was panicking through all these different rooms. But I could read it very easily as this is Cooper trying to figure things out with his mind and soul, whereas the Mauve Zone, I'm inclined to believe he's literally in like a train station or bus depot trying to decide what outlet to go through. Like, I imagine this is an actual location he can visit rather than something just in his mind and soul.
Yes.
But again, that ties into viewing Mr. C as probably a separate entity than Dale Cooper, something with Bob. It's not like... Because, like, part of me wants to read it, if I go the psychological route, that Mr. C is the same Dale Cooper from the original show. He corrupted in some way, and that the quote-unquote real Dale Cooper trying to get out and fight him is maybe the innocence or the hope that he used to have that got shattered 25 years ago, and it is still an inward struggle, but the existence of separate forms, the existence of Dougie Coop, it starts to obfuscate it, where it can't just be one person with an inner struggle, the way that Leland had Bob inside and it was one person inner struggle. This seems to be several different people.
Within you, there are 2, maybe 3, maybe 5 wolves.
Yeah,
It's a whole pack in there.
Yeah, and that's where I think it kind of gets weird to me. And I want to just, last thing I have on my notes here to talk about with this is juxtaposing what I think is one of the best uses of the unknown in metaphor versus one of the weakest. We get in part 1, where one of our first introductions to anything involving the Return and our first introduction to anything involving the spiritual nature is Question × 7, aka probably the Giant, talking to Dale Cooper in there in the black and white zone, and it's really just unfolding as a series of things. Hey, you should pay attention to this. Richard and Linda, 253, time and time again. Listen to these sounds. It feels like I'm taking notes for a test, right? It feels like I'm taking notes for a test. It's telling Dale Cooper and thus the viewer, pay attention to this, 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 and this, and this. So far, now that we're 10 hours or so into the Return, Richard and Linda have not come up unless we're supposed to take Richard Horn, maybe. But who's Linda? And then we're still kind of confused. 253, like Major Briggs, it said 253 on the little slip, but like, is that the thing that matters? So even 10 hours in, I'm like, I don't know how important that is.
Now, the tone of the series, I will say, before I make my next note, is like the tone's drastically different from the original Twin Peaks.
Yes.
The magic has dissipated. You cannot go back to what there was. There can be nostalgia in the air, but you are still in the present moving forward to the future. I think it also comes forward in those sort of like cryptic ideas. Like sometimes you'll see hints sprinkled around. You have people such as Lil who are able to sort of like put different stances, and the agents are able to dissect the small bits of movements. You have the gun will come back in style, the birds fly together. But in this, you kind of get just plain facts, and even when there's like distinct code or like playing with an idea of like trying to communicate to someone, it's like from this episode with Ike the Spike, he goes he's gonna give a message to JT, which is Mr. Todd in this case, that no cigar, taking medical leave. No cigar, just like, you're so close, but no cigar. For the tone that we're getting for the Return, it's fitting enough, but it still makes a stark contrast.
Yeah, to me, the stark contrast in the favor of good here is Part 8. Part 8 is the shining exception to a lot of what we're talking about here, because to me, I think Part 8 actually works really well on that barrier between literal and metaphor in a way that a lot of other things, again, in the Return, lean very clearly literal. So what I mean by that is that Part 8, you get the scene of the atomic bomb going off, and then as you zoom in through the bomb, you get that moment with the experiment vomiting out the Bob orb. You can read that very literally, and you can say that this is the birth of Bob, this is the beginning of Bob, the experiment produced it, when the atomic bomb went off in this year, at this time, this is the lore. And you can totally read that way, and maybe that's what you want to run with. But you can also interpret it very loosely and say that, well, okay, it's not literally that. It's more just the general idea that the evil that men do is created or facilitated by weaponry and by the nuclear bomb. That when the bomb was dropped, it unleashed a great evil, just in general. And I think that both of those readings work. And you can also look at the convenience store thing very literally. That's when the convenience store happened. Or you can, again, abstract it and look at it as a more general concept. Even the things going on with the question mark times 7, flying into the air in the black and white zone, and dreaming of Laura, and then Laura's orb coming down. Yes, you can interpret that that is the beginning of Laura's soul, or that is the hope of Laura Palmer specifically, and that she's meant to fight Bob, and she's the good ball to the bad ball of Bob. Or you can look at it, again, more metaphorically, or meta in general, fourth wall, that Laura Palmer is being dreamed up as this form of happiness or hope, and that when Senorita Dido looks at it, it is this thing, like maybe the audience is looking at Laura and smiling, and that it's this metaphorical goodness, this metaphorical hope. It's not literally, I'm going to raise you one Avatar Aang versus your Fire Lord Ozai. It's more like, this is the sense of evil in the world, this is a sense of good in the world, again, very abstractly. I think Part 8 manages to straddle that line and do a bit of both and work both ways better than most other things in The Return, which lean very much like literally.
I think that there is something that David Lynch does very well with cinematography when he's able to flex with it. I think that examples such as episode 8, as well as the accidental scene that happens with the fly later in the episode, are good examples of the extreme into the mythical end and the small moment piece by piece and just like quick action moments that he can do there. I think David Lynch does it very well with these actions. It just becomes more contestable with some of the longer drawn-out scenes where we are sitting down and waiting for things to happen. Now, mind you, there's one thing that this reminded me of, and we saw this today. Kalil, I recognize this is not in the notes.
Sure.
I recognize that no listener knows about this before we speak about right now. But can we take a moment while we're like reprising knowledge to talk about David Lynch's PlayStation 2 commercial, The Third Place?
Yeah, what about it?
So David Lynch's...
He made a few PlayStation commercials. He made one about a deer, the Bambi commercial, and then one about the third place. Maybe there's more, but those are the two I'm aware of.
But this is an example of fun cinematography playing with elements, and some of them actually do get reprised in The Return, such as the head floating moment in Monks It, the constant use of the black and white, and someone in a well-dressed suit walking through a hallway before he's met with his double.
Yeah, David Lynch has been recycling some of the same images and ideas for decades.
Oh, absolutely. I just am especially entertained by the fact that there's literally the arm that is sprouted from the floor in this third place, met with various variations of this person in a well-trimmed suit, very similar to Cooper, where you see the exact double sitting on the chair waiting him. A duck head, which could be recommended as, like how you have like duck decoys, like a decoy potential variation of it, potentially a Dougie decoy variation, and then
Ducky.
And then we also have some. You have too much power.
Yeah, I now have the soundboard, by the way, so.
All those emotions in that quick rapid fire is exactly how I feel. And then someone absolutely cast almost as if someone is supposed to die.
Yeah.
In which I'm almost someone inside the distance, but still the idea of the third place in this black and white zone and still flirting with this mauve zone. I suppose now looking at this 2001 ad, what was David Lynch doing there? How this parallels a bit more with the Twin Peaks? Is this the idea of recycled ideas, or did he have like ideas of this in the first place? What happens with David Lynch? What happens with David Lynch in general? Whether you like The Return or not, it does become a magnum opus piece because of how much is reused and reinterpreted.
Well, we gave David Lynch 18 hours.
We gave David Lynch 18 hours.
It's kind of his playground. And you're going to get almost everything he's done before at some other point.
Yes.
And that's why, again, my rationale was to show you all the David Lynch films before going into The Return, because I think it is such a different thing. Like, the original Twin Peaks...
Why didn't you show me the third place PlayStation 2
I should have known that was the most important thing. Anyway, we watched parts 9 and 10. And I must confess at this point, again, I'm going to mainly pivot on your opinions and your thoughts throughout this part. Throughout this whole podcast. But I do want to mention that for my own experiences, when I first watched it, I was really disappointed in the 9 and 10 because I loved part 8. And then we had that week or so break. And I genuinely, maybe naively, expected that after part 8, that was going to be a changing point. We were halfway through the series when we get to part 9. That's the halfway mark. And I'm thinking, we just had part 8 happen. That was huge. There's going to be consequence. This is going to affect things. That was dropping a stone in the water and we're going to ripple now. And I don't know about you, but to me, it felt like part 9 and 10 were kind of more of the same. More of the similar tone we got from part 7. It's like part 8 happened and then we just kind of like walked around it, walked around the crater. And I'll be honest, I was hoping that Dale Cooper would be back in part 9. I thought that meant, part 8 meant a huge change was coming. I get the Dougie joke, we're good to move on. And then part 9 and 10 come along and it's the same Dougie jokes we've had for the past, few hours. So I want your thoughts. What did you think of 9 and 10? After moving past part 8, do you like 9 and 10 better than part 8? What do you think of the show just kind of continuing? Did you detect any change in the ecosystem?
I will say that I didn't expect change after part 8 myself. I saw part 8, especially since it's not on present day, it's taking a note from the past. I just assumed it may have been another series of things to acknowledge, keep note on, but also kind of fill the environment, like a nice little bit of smog to consider for later. So with that in mind and looking onto it, I wasn't bothered by these shifts right back into what seems to be the norm. In fact, I would even argue that though there aren't many large momentum and moving pieces, or feels like a large moving momentum piece like with the previous part, I still think that we have some of the strongest performances of the return in these next couple parts, between things such as the Casino Brothers, between Richard Horn. There's some very solid points through this, which makes me almost wonder. I do really enjoy the return right now. I really, really do. But I'm very curious that if you separated the pieces of the return and put the focus on the younger generation of Twin Peaks, if you focus just on the Dougie Coop aspects and the points of Vegas, what sort of show would come from that? And
essentially, we're asking cut out a lot of Buckhorn and a lot of FBI, right? That's basically what we're suggesting.
Buckhorn, here's the thing. I wouldn't say cut out Buckhorn, but I do think at the very least the tone, focus, and character dynamics would need a bit of shuffling around. Myself, in my personal opinion. We'll get more into the big FBI problems later. I still think the two parts that I mentioned before, though, are very strong and in their own right, I think would make very compelling media on their own. The fact that they're together in different pieces is something that makes it still fun for myself, but it makes it more difficult for me to recommend it outwards. Because, there's some very strong character moments. There's some very strong scenes. So a little bit of bumpy on the road at points, but still, I think, very strong moments through these parts.
So returning to my question,
yes.
Do you like parts 9 and 10 better than part 8?
Yes.
Do you think they're stronger?
No.
Okay, so the reason you like them better is just because it's building on previous establishment.
It's building on previous establishment. There's some heavily great parts that I'm personally taking on to hold, and things that I'm very happy that I got a chance to see and experience twice, just about the way that we see our pod. And no, I was having a great time with parts 9 and 10.
See, for me, part 8 is just such a clear, high blip on the radar, where it's now we're returning back to the norm that isn't as exciting, innovative, interesting visually, auditorily, narratively as what I was getting out of part 8. So to me, it is a big letdown to come back to 9 and 10. And I also will note, when I was taking my notes on this might be the fewest notes I've had for the amount of time this covers. Between these 2 hours of television, I only had 4 pages of notes, when usually I'm hitting 8 or 9 pages for 2 hours. So I just have very little to write about, because the vast majority of this series of 2 parts is passing on information.
It is.
It's conversations, and not to say it never happened before. Obviously, Twin Peaks is a soap opera originally. It had a lot of conversations. But a lot of this is telling us things we either already know or weren't around to see. and it's a lot of passing around information in such a way where I look at Richard Horn and Chad as being probably the most actionable characters. Richard Horn does things, horrible things, mind you, but he goes out and has actions and scenes, whereas a lot of the rest of this is just, when I'm writing summaries of it, Tammy hands the phone to Gordon Cole. Gordon Cole finds out that Dale Cooper escaped the prison. Okay, we're told about something that we already saw as an audience.
Yes, but I do think that one of the interesting choices that happens, and I'm not even saying that it's just like unique to here. Like you can see the previous David Lynch works. You can see things dealing with Twin Peaks, and I would say that flashbacks aren't too terribly common. They do happen. Like one in Twin Peaks, if we to use Twin Peaks as an example, was a point where the Horn brothers are looking back on
in the
original
season 1, season 2 run.
Yes, and I would say that is a powerful and very memorable scene.
I love the Louise Dombrowski part.
As opposed to hearing Bobby sort of like reflect upon his father and not having any imagery or setup onto it, we are left with Bobby's actor trying to lift up and carry the performance, and he does a great job, but there still is something lacking there where you do actively feel like you are standing there, similar to Frank, and just kind of like taking in this new information, standing is like, okay.
Yeah, and even similarly, we get the moment with his mother talking about Garland Briggs and how they had a conversation in the past about this chair. We're told about the conversation. We don't see anything. So it's just her standing by a chair and saying, look carefully. This is the chair. And I'm like, neat. That's a chair. I don't have any emotional response to it because I was just told this chair existed like 2 minutes ago, and it's just a chair. Like, I just don't find it that interesting and like, oh, cool, she pulled a little tube out of it.
Yeah.
It's a narrative device, and that's all it feels like. Whereas the Louise Dombrowski part with Jerry Horn and Ben Horn, seeing the old-timey footage was a great way to contextualize the flashback. It didn't have to break its normal formula. It just showed us something on the screen, and I thought between the music, which again is sorely missing from a lot of the return, between the music and then getting Ben's kind of emotional reaction, it felt like such a palate cleanser and such an interesting look into these characters that normally we don't associate Ben with these wholesome memories of family. At that time, we associated Ben with terrible, terrible deceit, lies, treachery, arsonry, dealing with, terrible people like Leo and Hank.
Yes.
So to have him privately in his own room, his own office, kicking his feet up on the desk and looking at this memory and like having all these emotions come to him, it was a beautiful moment that really we don't have anything quite like that in the return.
Not at the moment, no.
Gordon Cole gets 2 phone calls, one saying that Garland Briggs' body was found in Buckhorn, so they're going to go there. He convinces Diane, and then he also gets a phone call from Warden Murphy saying that Mr. C has escaped, something, again, we'd already seen. Now Gordon Cole's caught up to speed. They go to Buckhorn, and a lot of what happens at Buckhorn is, again, things we've already known, we just get to hear it again. There's this moment, though, where Diane is in the lobby, and she is reading this text on her phone that says, around the dinner table, the conversation is lively. We also get that matched up at a different point with Mr. C typing out a message like that.
Yes.
So heavy implications that Diane is working alongside Mr. C. We find out later on from Albert that this conversation, there was a heavily encrypted message from Mexico, basically where Diane is telling Mr. C, presumably, information about what's going on, talking about Bill Hastings, leaking information. So what are your thoughts on the whole revelation of Diane and Mr. C working together, potentially?
At this point, it's the questionable nature of what is Diane planning, per se. Like, we saw how her reaction was in private alongside with Mr. C. It didn't seem like there was a point where they were trying to unite, but I think at this point, they are trying to play against each other, very similar to Wyndham Earle and Dale Cooper at this time, where they're willing to try to step closer in their own personal ways, except I would say that Diane is more of an active agent in this point.
So you think Diane is against Mr. C, but is using information to play against him?
Yes.
Okay, so why would she keep that secret from the FBI?
She would keep it secret from the FBI because as far as the FBI goes, they've been mainly able to get her to those locations that she didn't want to be a part of in the first place. And for the fact that she's willing to meet up with Mr. C privately means that she's probably going to try to still deal with it privately. Likely there's a lot of personal emotions, and likely that private meeting from before is more personal to herself, that having the FBI in the way would then probably take away from, I would say, either vengeance, vindication, or potentially her trying to resolve her issues personally.
So are you thinking then that the Albert and Gordon Cole conversation where they're both worried that she is kind of betraying them, that's a misdirect from David Lynch?
I think she is betraying them, but in a different fashion. It's not as if they are...
She's using Gordon Cole and Albert to get information to fight on her own terms.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend in this case.
Okay. So when do you think then Diane would have originally gotten the number for Mr. C? How did they get in contact?
They got in contact likely after Mr. C ended up making conversation with them, and Mr. C would know from past experiences what Diane's numbers were, and using these burner phones.
I mean, years later, would they know the same phone number?
They were talking about Dale Cooper here. We're talking about Dale Cooper, in which I do believe that if he could have a pocket of knowledge of random information, especially when it comes to someone that he had communicated with on almost like a daily, if not bi-daily basis.
So you think that Mr. C at some point in the past 25 years got in contact with Diane, and he's the one that initiated?
Either within the last 25 years or just recently, but still recalls the information from
since he got out of prison?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we also have someone who literally, through the act of electricity, was able to dial in and cause a place to go through chaos. If we believe they have the power of electricity, who's to say that they can't affect the dial tones to reach out to where they need to go? How far does this reach to any extent?
So the message that he sent her around the dinner table, the conversation is lively.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
It's more lively. That means that there's a lot of people talking. There's a lot of things going on at the moment. So if anything, it's like an under the door method of saying, like, everyone's distracted at this time. If there's a point to act, now's the time to act.
So what is he suggesting Diane do?
I don't know if he's suggesting anything Diane should do other than implying something Diane would know. So it's an especially coded message that's simply saying they're distracted. Now's the time.
And who's they?
That's a question. I think the most likely individuals are probably the FBI around her, but at the same time, how far do these factions go, especially with Mr. C? Mr. C, from this episode, we've seen in front of the glass box, we've seen with external factions that are able to get him resources that he needs. We know everything that happened with Ray in the last episode on how that went, but still was a faction he was involved with. And everything that's now happening with Dougie Coop and Mr. Todd, he seems to be actively communicating with. He's got so many thumbs and pies and or soups that, unfortunately, it could be any amount of crowd. It's just probably going to have to overlap with a conversation they had off screen at one instance, whether or not we discover it later.
If we go by your logic, then we just added another force at play, because previously it would be assumed that Diane was the same team, if you want to think of them as teams, as Gordon, Cole, and Albert, and Tammy. But now you've got the FBI trio with Diane playing them, basically.
She's basically an independent contractor amongst a group of trained individuals. She herself is trained as well, but she is the most affiliation she has. If she was ever in trouble with the FBI, they can get more trouble being part of the FBI than she can.
Now,
she's a more free agent than those.
Of all these teams then at play, how much potential do you see in Diane as a force trying to win out against Mr. C versus the other forces at play?
Oh, I think that Diane is going to be following her emotions for the most part, and she's going to die.
Okay.
Like, genuinely, I do think that she's going to try her best. I think that she's going to be a force that she believes that she will reckon with. But we also know the mythical powers of Mr. C being shot and being brought by burnt Abraham Lincoln, to then be processed. And unfortunately, I don't see much in Diane's way of hurting him unless it's going to be something like the power of love. Ooh.
Don't die,
Don't Diane. Run away.
We also get some interesting, potentially important information with Bill Hastings. Again, communicated to us rather than shown, but that Bill Hastings and Ruth Davenport had a blog and had been blogging about alternate dimensions. And this Search for the Zone was a real website. In fact, I actually just double-checked real quick, and the website does appear to be down. It's no longer available, but on the Twin Peaks Wiki, you do have archived information about it.
That's good.
So from what we can glean over here, the blog was started in 1997. This is assuming that the blog is canon when it's an external website from the show.
Yes.
Anyway, the blog was started in 1997. As early as 2010, visitors were leaving comments in the guest book. Hastings would occasionally respond, and the last update took place in November 2015. And there's a whole bunch of stuff over here. There's links that get sent throughout the website to different researches. It kind of does what the Mark Frost book did, to the extent that I'd be wondering if Mark Frost had a heavy hand in this website, because it's a bunch of archived research information trying to suggest certain ideas about these supernatural elements with some real world things following up with it. According to the Twin Peaks wiki, Mark Frost suggested the concept but wasn't involved in writing the site itself. So that's curious. Yeah, so it appears to be down. I wish that was still up, unfortunately. It was a subreddit for a while back, but all this to the side, what did you think of Bill Hastings, his interrogation with Tammy Preston?
If you are a fan of Scream and you've enjoyed this actor, whether he's in Scream or Shaggy or whatever, the absolute levels of extremities in his acting is very entertaining. I think that he's very talented on reaching out to those extreme angles. He showed up for work that day and he did a great job. I think genuinely he did a very great job. I think that people will be a fan of his performance. Tammy asked him questions, and we can't juxtapose onto the stuff because we haven't seen any compromising items.
There was nothing that Tammy did that couldn't have been done by any other agent.
Yes.
And again, that's where you contrast it directly with Dale Cooper's interrogation even in the pilot. His first interrogation we saw on screen versus Tammy's interrogation on screen. Yeah, it writes itself, the comparison, right? What do you think of the revelations here that he had met with a Major who was hibernating in this zone, and that he identified that Major as being Major Garland Briggs?
Major Garland Briggs, he signed off on it. It's all sorts of fun because we are also playing with the odds and ends of, one, Garland Briggs was existing in this zone. For number two, they were told to get things such as military coordinates in order for him to do something. Number three, we had literally him float up into the air and his head popped off, but he was floating in the air, I would say in a very similar fashion to multiple question marks man inside the strange zone, which may be the Mauve zone and maybe multi-question mark man's situation, where his head just pops up, goes away, the body's left over. But instead of, being something gentle, this was probably one of the most fierce examples of the Mauve Zone without us seeing anything from the Mauve Zone, because it ends up with a bunch of dead bodies.
So, kind of playing off the most likely scenarios here, just check my logic here.
Go for it.
It sounds as though, from what we have right now, that the Mauve Zone is the same place that Bill Hastings and Ruth Davenport had visited. That's the same place where they met Garland Briggs. That Garland Briggs had either staged or made it look like he died 25 years ago with the fire burning down at his station. But instead of actually dying, he had managed to slip away out of this world into this zone and has remained in this zone for the time, which is why his body didn't age the way of the corpse that was found with Ruth Davenport. And that's why his head doesn't look like the head of a 70-year-old. It looks more like the age of the actor we had seen previously, that he had existed in some form of stasis during this time, somehow not aging the way that Dale Cooper's body had aged, or Laura Palmer's, or Leland's, or anyone else we see in the Red Room in The Return, but somehow being preserved for that time.
The only thing that I would question is whether or not the fire is either something staged or as a result of entering this other zone, or something had happened that caused a fire and also him to transport.
See, what I'm imagining is his Mayday distress signal in the Secret History of Twin Peaks is indicating that part of the Mayday protocol is burn everything down. And we know from the Secret History of Twin Peaks that Agent TP is looking at the dossier from an active crime scene. We still don't know with The Return what that active crime scene is.
No.
I mean, I don't know if you have on your own time, but I haven't gone through and pieced together the timeline to even figure out when the dossier would have been given to her relative to The Return.
Yes.
Has she looked at the dossier by now in part 10?
I don't know. I assumed going forward that she'd already seen the dossier, but at the same time, we haven't had any evidence of her saying any knowledge on Twin Peaks.
Because 2016 would be the years for both of these events, I would imagine, right? Because
maybe.
Yeah, 2016 was stated in the book, and we know we're in September right now, to varying days in September.
It could be actively happening in the background. It could be before. It could potentially be after. Haven't gone that far to suss that out yet.
That's, again, not clear to us at this moment.
No.
But there is an active crime scene where that dossier was found. My indication is that Garland Briggs would have burned everything down to hide the evidence before Cooper got a hold of it, because he would have recognized that this is not the same Dale Cooper. Something is horribly wrong. I can't let him get access to what is likely the coordinates.
Potentially. The only questionable thing is that what are methods to entering the mob zone? Well, we do know one method of going into, well, rather out of the mob zone, and that was via outlet. If there was any sort of electrical issues that happened inside the space and Garland was whisked away, and if the resulting reversal of that may have caused the short circuit to start a fire in a place that's completely alone, that's where I could argue that it could be something in which was a result of him entering the mob zone, no one being attended around electrical outlet that ends up sparking, and then a fire may burst.
I just think of the reference
series of potential speculation.
To me, it's the reference to there being a protocol.
Fair.
That's what makes me think he had to have done something after the Secret History of Twin Peaks. That he did some sort of protocol. I would imagine that involves destroying evidence before it reaches the wrong hands. I also like to give Major Briggs agency. So if I don't know any better, I'd like to assume Major Briggs did something on purpose rather than it just happened by accident due to the nature of the zone. I think that's less interesting of a result.
Maybe it might be less interesting to you, but there's also a point where I haven't seen Major Briggs as an active agent as usual, so maybe that difference doesn't make too much for me.
To me, it's been implied enough from the series and from Secret History that I think he would be an active agent to fulfill the protocol that had been laid out either by Douglas Milford or by just the other predecessors.
Very well.
Of what the plan would be in that event. And again, we do get a date, judging by when Bill Hastings writes and circles the Major Briggs photo. It's 9/20. It's September 20th. Whereas later we find out in the town of Twin Peaks, it is only a few days away from October, so it is further into the month. So we're a week separated between the stuff going on in the Buckhorn FBI plotline from the town of Twin Peaks. What do you make of that week separation?
Not much, I suppose, just because there's no active agents at this time that make up for the difference in time dilation. Because for the most part, the events in Twin Peaks, unless they're going to become especially important soon, is mostly just Hawk trying to figure things out.
So you don't think it matters very much that the situations going on with the police, Bobby, etc., in the town of Twin Peaks are about a week ahead of what's happening with the FBI in Buckhorn?
Not at all. It just means that likely we're going to get more scenes with the FBI, Buckhorn, Vegas, just to make up for the differences in time that's just a little bit ahead. And I just think that maybe there's just less action that the town of Twin Peaks has to make in order for Mr. C and Dougie Coop to catch up. So it just kind of gives a little bit of a running start for them at this time, but almost promises that, hey, other than maybe a few certain scenes, we're probably going to be focusing on these guys' journey on their way here. So it just seems like a convenient separation in time dilation.
Okay, fair enough. I won't say much more about that, given I do know more, but I do think that is interesting because you were speculating before about a time discrepancy potentially between the Mr. C plot line and the Dougie plot line.
Oh, yeah, but that was thinking years. If it's about a week in a difference, it's okay, well, that makes sense for the narrative of this story at this time, especially if they're trying to go with certain balances of a tone.
I just think it's interesting they show us because they didn't have to show us the dates,
No, they don't have to show us the dates, but I do think that this very much is a show where keeping track, keeping note, and trying to organize the files as if they've been shuffled around
it gives you
is
homework.
part of the appeal.
It gives you homework.
It's part of the appeal. Whether you recognize it as homework or a larger puzzle box to play around with, this is actually something more physical you can play with than, say, for example, in Twin Peaks with the puzzle box that was given to Catherine and her brother.
Right.
This is actually something you can tangibly work with.
Yes. You also praised Matthew Lillard's performance earlier. I just want to kind of add a little bit to that I also enjoyed his performance, and I think part of it also does come from the writing. I don't know how much the intent was comedy when David Lynch and Mark Frost wrote the dialogue for this, and how much of the dialogue was already prescribed, but I can't help but find some humor in a very positive way from some of the lines that we get out of Matthew Lillard's character in the scene, where he's crying and just overwhelmed emotion as he's talking about, we were going to soak up the sun. And I just, again, I think of the song, right? We're going to soak up the sun. I'm thinking of the 90s song. I think it's 90s. And I'm also thinking of the line scuba diving. He says scuba diving 3 or 4 times. And I cannot, for the life of me, get out of my head Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo.
Scooby diving. And I don't know if that was on purpose. I don't know if saying scuba diving, because again, what does Shaggy call him? Scoob. So every time he says scuba diving,
it's like Scoop.
So I don't know. I don't know if that's on purpose. I just think there's a little tongue-in-cheek nature to it that I read into the lines that I think adds to the performance, being the lines themselves are funny in context. And David Lynch has a history of making situations happen where you're not sure if you're supposed to feel sad, scared, or laugh. And this is one of those where this man's life is going horribly wrong, but it is kind of funny.
He's absolutely having an absolute breakdown, but I'm very happy to hear that scuba diving. Come on, Scoop, we were going to have a happy life together.
Potentially having a happy life together are Albert and Constance, the person who works at the morgue. Or at least does the autopsies. I don't have much to say about the little date scene they go on.
It's a cute little coupley thing.
I just find it weird that Tammy Preston and Gordon Cole are there, because we see them appear over like the hallway or like the corner of a wall, and Gordon Cole like brings over like, hey Tammy, look at this, and he points, and they both like have a little giggle and say how cute it is or how sweet it is. But like they act like they're surprised to see this, right? They act like they're surprised to see Albert and Constance together. But if they're at the same restaurant, I assume they went in together, right? Like, I assume this wasn't an unplanned coincidence. They both happened to go to the same restaurant,
they could also,
right?
Yeah, they could honestly, like, set it up with saying, hey, we should probably get some food to eat, and then they go out to eat. And having this instance where they end up sitting down and having eating time, it seems more deliberate or planned between Albert and herself, rather than just an instance where they just happened to stumble into a meal with one another. If they were seated at a bar, it would be different, but the bar is behind Tammy and Gordon Cole. If they had either switched spots or made an illusion of like where they're standing in the environment, that might be different. But elsewise, again, it's a very cute moment. They admire the cute moment. They have a cute time with the moment.
The best I can imagine is that they did know they were going to be there together. They all went together. But the thing that they're remarking on isn't the coincidence of seeing them. It's that Albert normally isn't that sociable. That's my best guess. But whenever I view it, I think they're laughing or enjoying the fact that they're together. But they should have already known that if they came in together.
It's something as an active agent, as opposed to like a mild bit of conversation or them off to the side. They're actually hitting it off well. It's showing a more emphasized point on it. So having them just having a great time and having an example that, you know what, things are actually getting better and better with those two. And they're admiring that. It makes sense at the very least for Gordon Cole's mark. I don't know enough about Tammy if it makes sense for her.
Meanwhile, in Gordon Cole's hotel room, he sits there sketching. How would you describe what he sketches?
A weird, like, coral reef style antler on top of a deer being reached out by a hand trying to touch it, but that is a bad idea, whether it is a coral reef and or deer's antlers. So it seems it's getting very close to something tempting before likely something bad's about to happen.
Okay, that's a good read. There's sort of a narrow snout-like mouth on the animal. It reminds me a lot like a Tim Burton Beetlejuice kind of sketch. It reminds something you would see out of Beetlejuice. There are the black splotches or spots on the body. So if you wanted to read into it all that there's those spots, is that where you're getting the coral vibes from?
I'm kind of getting the coral vibes from that, but also from the very odd shape of it. Usually you have a nice little symmetry that's being brought to the center with a few little like spots kind of like either branching out or away, but it seems pretty fairly, I would say from my memory, even on where like the spikes of the antlers are going all over the place.
I also am thinking of the arm being like Michael Jordan long, so it's the long arm of the law.
It was his...
Right?
Yeah, no, it's probably either the long arm of the law or attempted script at Space Jam 2 that he was involved with until he was dropped.
Don't want to step on Super Eye Patch Wolf's territory with the Space Jam 2 script, okay? He's already got that one covered on YouTube. But no, I mean, I do think that's a read because, again, the way that Gordon Cole, or sorry, I should say David Lynch, maybe encrypts things, I could imagine it's a long arm for the long arm of the law. It just feels very what he would do. But then it's the idea that, yeah, the long arm of the law is stretching towards something potentially dangerous, ominous, getting a bit too close to it.
Yeah.
My immediate gut would be Mr. C, but you could extend that to Richard. You could even extend that to Diane in the sense that they're getting close to this person who could potentially harm them.
Yes.
So there are a few ways to read it. I just think it's a nice David Lynch drawing. It's a fun time.
Nice David Lynch drawing that he walks away from before opening the door, which should be Albert on the other side, but instead shows a quick vision of Laura Palmer right before fading into Alfred.
What was your emotional response to this jump scare of love? Whatever Laura was supposed to represent in that moment to you.
For the most part, it's just more information for Gordon Cole. It's something where he's seeing visions, he's seeing sights, and likely there's a vibe of terror and dread that's bound to be behind the door. And it does communicate a bit of terror and dread, or likely a very subdued terror and dread.
Does Gordon Cole even recognize her? because he never met Laura. He only vaguely assigned Dale Cooper to the case 25 years ago. Would he even recognize this person?
There's no answer for that. There's no point where he goes like, I saw you look like Laura Palmer, Alfred. There's no information for me to feed off of that.
See, I don't think
the only
he would.
thing that allows me to feed off of that is the information that he receives from Alfred, where we're talking more about the Diane information, how Diane is being involved with, like, releasing information that she shouldn't. So that's where I find the terror and dread parallel, and using Laura Palmer to be the effective
Did you find
note.
it scary?
Did I find it scary? I don't
Like,
find
what was
things
your
like this
emotional
scary.
response?
I didn't find Mudman scary in Mulholland Drive.
Well, I'm just more wondering...
But what I'm saying is that, no. The answer is no. I did not find it scary. I don't find Mudman scary. I don't find this scary. But it doesn't need to be scary for me to associate what I think David Lynch is going for.
So do you think it was meant to be a scary jump scare scene, or what was the emotion that you're supposed to feel? Again, we're reading intent into this, but what was the point of it emotionally?
I don't know what you're supposed to feel. Maybe he's trying to make a little bit of a jump scare, but maybe he's just trying to put dread. I can only go for what ended up cinching onto me, and that is a sense of dread, confusion, and a sense of bad omen being presented right before. And if it happens to jump scare people, or if he wanted to jump scare people, I feel that's a secondary effect.
Because for me, it didn't work the first time I saw it, and it didn't work this time again. Partly because the illusion of the door does not work for me. It doesn't work in a literal way where I don't believe that's actually... Because the problem is the size and scaling. Like, the I don't know what you say, aspect ratio, or like the scaling of Laura Palmer's image relative to the door. She is like a weirdly proportioned person if that's meant to be Gordon Cole's eye level. So to me, it took me out of the experience. It never felt real. I never was able to, in either my initial viewing or reviewing, imagine he's actually seeing it. I just imagined someone in like a video editor shrinking down the image of the clip cut of that like crop and just moving that cropped image loosely over the door. It doesn't feel real to me. But I wanted to bring up that even if Gordon Cole doesn't recognize Laura, he would know it's Laura, because in the background, in that sort of distorted vocals, we get Sarah Palmer calling out Laura's name.
And that might be a case where he could try to associate with it, but with no reply.
I'm just wondering if Sarah Palmer saying Laura, if that matters for this moment as much as the visual, because the visual maybe communicates fear for something ominous is happening. Why include the Sarah Palmer line of Laura?
For the most part, mood, tone, association could be the easiest responses to it. If you want to go above and beyond in the respects, it could be someone calling out to the distance, but someone unable to act as they cry out. So there's going to be a lack of control inside of it. At this point, it's very much a Ouija board ominous message for Gordon Cole to keep latch on. Not to mention the association with Sarah Palmer, or also Laura Palmer by extension, for a family of seers, people who have visions, having Gordon Cole also be associated with visionaries could be another additional token on who is Gordon Cole at the end of the day.
Fair enough. I was reading the Twin Peaks wiki on this, and it mentioned that there was a visual glitch that happens when Tammy Preston enters. Something with the doorknob is what it was said. Were you able to detect or see what that was?
I wasn't looking too close at the doorknob myself, though I should probably keep looking out for Josie myself. There was nothing I was able to detect on either viewing. But some of these glitches are just very difficult for me to see.
I think I'm kind of confused on this one, because I tried to find something. The only thing that seemed like it could be counted as a glitch is that her motion is in slow motion. And there's like some auditory elements, like it's more ominous ambient music with her kind of slow-mo walking toward the door. Is that the glitch that the wiki's referring to?
That's the hard part, especially when communicating with it outside of a glitch or a means of analysis, because with something such as glitches, it can be anywhere. It could be auditory.
Yeah, I usually am pretty good about picking them up, and this
small
one,
reflections. It could be so many things, and maybe it is those so many things that makes these glitches special for others.
So I am genuinely curious, listener, if you know what the glitch is with Tammy, and it mentioned with the doorknob, could you please let us know either through a YouTube comment, a tweet at SnakeEyeDreams1, that's the numeral 1 is in one glitch, please. And then also you could email us at snakeeyedreams@gmail.com, because I feel like I'm either missing something or the glitch is just very obvious slow-mo of Tammy. And if it's the slow-mo of Tammy, I didn't think it worked.
No.
So let's talk about Tammy. You and I have talked off-pod about Tammy. And the reason I even bring up why we talk off pod is because we could just jump into it and pretend like this is organically a new conversation. But odds are we're going to leak in things from what we've already said off pod anyway. I want the listener to know, yeah, this is a little little bit of a second wind for us on this topic.
Yes, the biggest proposal that I would go to lead on to this conversation is that the biggest problems I have in the show are Tammy and Gordon Cole.
Yeah.
Mostly because I think Gordon Cole overshadows things for any amount for Tammy to shine, but also, why is generally Gordon Cole there? Why did it have to be Gordon Cole? No mark against David Lynch on certain points. I think he's very good in small doses. I think that his sort of like juxtaposition ways are fun with things such as the whistling scene in The Return, or if there is a point where he's giving communicated errors or oddities through this other agent while he's standing in front of an airplane. I think he's good as almost like a presentory, this is behind the curtain style
I would say
way.
he was best in Fire Walk With Me.
He was best as a character off to the side, but putting him right at front, it's just very hard to sort of like connect, vibe, and try to figure out what's going on with Gordon Cole. I don't think that David Lynch, amazing director. I think he works very well in depth with people. Don't really like him as much as an actor. Meanwhile,
he's okay. Like, I don't think he's actively bad. It's just he is not as fun to watch as someone like Bobby Briggs with that actor.
Meanwhile, you have a character that you're trying to emphasize to have the stuff, but when you have literally Gordon Cole kind of taking the lead on the FBI investigation, you can't really have someone who has the stuff to shine.
Yeah.
In truth, having someone sort of like take a more front step approach, similar to how Dale Cooper did in that fashion, to show those quirks, agencies, and how they behave. If we removed Gordon Cole from the equation and instead paired Tammy up with Albert Rosenfeld, a newer perspective versus a jaded older one, but both for the respect and love for their jobs, I think would be very fun between interacting with Diane with this newer, fresher perspective, as opposed with someone who Diane has like negative associations with the whole entire way. I think it'd be very fun whenever it comes to like her trying to dissect the information around her, and even throwing in some of the quirks from like The Secret History of Twin Peaks. If there's associated media that is on in the background, or she can pull up for herself, such as a TV in the background, whether or not she's watching a movie in the background while she's trying to work with her work, and then associate that while putting through clues. I think that there's a lot of fun media-based parallels you can do, and further things such as the Dying Past commentary with Tammy, if you remove Gordon Cole for a majority. Whistling scene's fine. Everything else, up for debate.
Yeah, and just to give context for those who might be joining us who did not read or go with our podcast on The Secret History of Twin Peaks, Tammy Preston was known as Agent TP in Mark Frost's The Secret History of Twin Peaks. She was one of the principal narrators of the book, and she had a few specific personality elements. One was that she's very skeptical, very much on the side of rationality, science, research, not believing very quickly all these weird conspiracy theories about aliens. She's more of the skeptic. The way that, again, someone like Albert might feel like he was kind of that way in the original run of the show or in Fire Walk With Me. Someone who kind of sees everyone falling for these weird ideas and is like, let's return to Earth, please. That's what Agent TP was. We do not get any of that so far in the first 10 hours of The Return, even though she has been told repeatedly, we've been told repeatedly, she has the stuff. Along the same note, one of her core characteristics in the book was that she liked to reference movies, pop culture. It kind of reminded me of something from like Metal Gear Solid 3, where there was a codec call person who would always give you random information about movies, and it would tie sometimes to the themes of the game or some mechanic of the game. There was some through line. So what, just to give context, what the professor is suggesting, and I agree with him, is, well, if you had that in the book, that she likes movies and media, use it. Use it that she draws information or intuition, not necessarily from dreams the way that Dale Cooper would, but she draws it out of media comparisons. Maybe that her brain fires, she thinks of this thing with this person, with that thing, with that character, with that actor, and she's able to draw in direct references to movies and television and media like that to come up with solutions to problems. Which I think would be really fun to play with, because David Lynch is no stranger to bringing in references to old films or old television in his work. In Twin Peaks originally, the noir Laura, the noir film Laura was hugely an inspiration. That's where Waldo came from, was that. You have all these characters' names and places that are direct references to classic films. The One-Armed Man was a reference to a classic piece of media. So I just feel like it makes total sense. And again, it ties into the themes of nostalgia, ties into the themes of reality versus fiction. You can run with it. The problem is that Mark Frost made a decent character with like definable character traits, like 2 or 3 definable character traits in the book. And then immediately after you go from the book to the show, The Return, she has none of that. She has nothing instead either. She just is empty. So yeah, make Tammy Preston more like she was in the book. Draw on that, spin that in your own way. With Gordon Cole, the only scene you really need him in was probably that whistling scene. You can have Albert and Tammy go visit him to basically, before they go off on their mission, they can get intel from him, they can debrief him, whatever the situation is. Gordon Cole should have been as big in this as probably Denise.
Yes.
So, like, as much as you can do to let your new character shine, write them with a personality and give them opportunities to be useful. Like, for example, there's so many moments where Tammy's either just standing there, or she's not even, like, there's no reason for her to be in a scene. So, like, with the smoking scene that happens, she's just kind of awkwardly standing there after she gives her one line about, Gordon, don't smoke, and then she just kind of stands there the rest of the time. Or one of the ones that stood out to me a lot when I was rewatching this episode was the idea that Gordon Cole and Albert have to leave the room to talk about information and pass it to each other, but then Tammy's just standing there. She can probably hear every word they're saying because they're not quiet, but it's still the idea of like, wait, if she's with you in this investigation and she's got the stuff, why are you literally leaving to pass information to each other? Information that she should know about too? To return kind of what character we're imagining, bring the stuff from Mark Frost's book, mix in Albert's skepticism, Cooper's intuition, and even a bit of Sam Stanley's observation, because she was known to be a fact checker in the book. She could go and verify everything. So I'm just imagining this really interesting mix of previous agents we've seen, but spin it in a new way. Give us a taste of what we've seen before, but in a new context.
The main issue that we have at this time is the fact that if we take Gordon Cole out of the question and just put Tammy right there, there's been nothing with Tammy without Gordon Cole, really.
Yeah.
Like, that is a problem.
That is a problem. Going to Las Vegas, a better place, mayhaps not. We have a little bit more stuff with Dougie Coop, although a lot of it's just kind of the natural fallout from the previous parts.
Yes.
With Ike the Spike and everything going on there. Bushnell Mullins gives a statement to the police about the attack on Dougie, gives Dougie the rest of the day off, which gives ample opportunities for Detectives Fusco to try to figure out what is going on and getting some prints off of a coffee mug.
Yes, there's a lot of different conflicting things. There's obviously like the conflict with the boss, who is saying that he's going to help with Dougie, but still had some form of reservation while he was speaking to the officers and trying to piece together even things in his own head at first, so I don't know which way of the scale this man may be swayed at this time, so it makes him a little bit of a rocky foundation that Dougie is probably going to have to rely on, because Dougie is someone like a tank. You just pop him down inside of a position and he just walks forward automatically.
Or just stands there for hours.
Either way, it's real. Dougie is an unpredictable landmine, as in he stays in the same spot. Who knows when he's going to blow. You have these police officers who end up discovering, hey, this guy maybe be part of an anonymous program.
A witness protection.
For the sake that he has no real records. He has
nothing before 1997.
Elsewise, not.
Now, nope. Why 1997?
Because that was when, I believe, if I'm recalling your information recently, that's when Enter the Mauve Zones magazine started.
The blog. Yeah, it's not a published magazine.
Published
the blog,
on the internet.
If you look at the Twin Peaks Wiki article, they have the photo of the blog. It looks like the most like GeoCities late 90s do-it-yourself internet design ever. It is a terrible looking blog and I love it.
It's something where we do know people were investigating and likely trying to tap into the Mauve Zone and was trying to figure out whether or not the Mauve Zone was starting to have sightings as an affect of potentially creating Dougie, and or people tampering around and making holes where they shouldn't be making holes as they're trying to work things through. It's reason enough to explain that year is pretty well associated with, well, between Dougie and Mauve. So that's my current running theory.
Sure. We also get this very weird scene with Dougie hearing America the Beautiful and glaring at a flag, and there's some red shoes. Woman wearing red shoes.
Yep, red shoes. Maybe ruby-ish.
Not slippers, though.
Not slip. They slip on.
They could slip on.
And it's the usage of the color red with a use of more feminine footwear. Yes.
I guess it's the American dream.
It's the American dream. Right now, there's no place like home style looking at the ruby slippers while panning the camera over to the nearby outlet. It may be a reminder to the internal Cooper within this Dougie that the need to be home, an actual home, instead of this dreamlike escaped home, this created reality, it's a need and compelling to go back. And the association with Red as well as footwear, after looking at that light, it's almost like sandwiched between scenes, is that we also see Janie E. also is wearing red footwear as well. Maybe she herself is living in a dream, because how did she come to be associated with Dougie, with Dougie's missing past and everything?
Well, 97 is when everything starts, so as long as they met after 97.
As long as they met after 97, but how did that go? What was Dougie beforehand?
Right.
And there was no further prying? What did Dougie say in response to say, oh, by the way, we should take our kids to your family's house this Christmas? How does that conversation go?
Again, if we go by the way he acted in the Red Room, he didn't seem to have any idea that something was weird about him. Like, he didn't seem to recognize that he was this potentially artificial creation that was
that's
alchemy.
Weird.
So I kind of am led to the idea that he was living a relatively normal life and memories were kind of implanted, right? That he didn't really know there was anything off because he never pried, I guess, in that
He never
way.
pried, he didn't pressure, he just didn't have parents.
Right. I mean, you could easily see a spin-off of this kind of idea where maybe the main character realizes that they weren't real the whole entire time because they start looking into their past and realize they have no records before 1997. But it does raise a lot of practical questions if you take it seriously, because how do you get by in life for like 20 years if you don't have a social security number? What are you doing to like make things happen?
He has been at the same job for, what was it, about 13 years? So it's not as if he's, like, moving around with much momentum, but it's a question of how do you even, like, apply for jobs without
that's what I mean. Is I honestly think there's no answer. I kind of think that this is just something you don't think about too much.
I think that there might be an answer in the respect and association with the mythical powers we've seen people gamble away and be able to make a place for themselves. Maybe Dougie E. was able to circumvent...
Right, but does that mean that Bushnell Mullins and the insurance company don't have a social security on record for him? How do they give him his taxes?
How do they give him his taxes? Maybe they just simply overlook, or Dougie
every
does something.
single year. This is why I think it kind of falls apart the more you scrutinize it, because you have to get extremely stretchy with what we have so far to make this make any sense, right? Like, it only works if you're willing to say that everyone around is bending the rules constantly, year on, year out for the past 20 years. I say 20 because 97 to 2017, which is presumably our time frame.
I like to think that the people from the Mob Zone we've seen are actively doing Dougie's taxes in the background and then just sort of like pass them the paper through the outlet.
T9! T9!
It all works out. It's nice and convenient there in that little tiny package, the little tiny outlet package.
Yeah, I noticed, Mr. Douglas Jones, all your taxes are backwards. Every single number is reversed.
And then, you give it to Dougie, and he just writes some stairs and some ladders, and then it's like, oh, now this looks like it's all loaded now.
We have not gotten any context.
Nope.
For what, do you like that you don't know
I like being lost.
Okay.
I do like
because to me, it's for how long Bushnell Mullins sat there staring at him. You think it's going to go somewhere, and then, no, it hasn't gone anywhere.
It hasn't.
There's no context for how, because you were visibly, reacting. I don't know if mad is the word I would use, but when we were watching this, you were really focused on the idea that Bushnell Mullins shouldn't be able to make sense of stairs and ladders.
But at the same time, whether I try to put it in a sense of humor or whether or not I try to put it in a sense of something that doesn't necessarily reach its conclusion, it still brings out that reaction, and I'm not necessarily mad, and it's not something that I think juxtaposes the general tone of the rest of the show in which it's causing too much conflict for me. So at the end of the day, it's just kind of fun. Fair
enough. Dougie goes to the doctor. Finally, someone helped him. And by that, I mean, they check to make sure that he's still hot. They make sure that he's lost weight and that
that he's not just I know that you mean by hot because he's got a six-pack of abs. But I was thinking to make sure that his blood is actually running warm and he's not a cold, dead corpse.
I don't know. Again, you can take humor in the idea that no one seems to get the urgency. It's the same joke we've had with Dougie this entire time. But it's the idea that, like, they take him to a medical doctor. She vaguely mentions he's felt kind of weird lately, but they don't really talk about his mental health, his brain health, nothing involving that. You got literally Dougie, like, touching the medical equipment, and the doctor's just like, nope, don't do that. And then just like, oh, no, he's perfectly healthy. Nothing wrong with this man whatsoever.
It's something where, with this situation,
it's a family doctor who should know what he's like normally.
Know what he's like normally, but we also get revealed in this episode that apparently he suffered from a car accident in which this sort of behavior has popped up from time to time. If they think it's one of these episodes and they don't want to go any further, or it might be a request that, hey, your insurance probably won't cover this, and they don't go further beyond that, like, I can see where avenues can go about where, like, this is the Dougie E. The problem the firm problem is, at the end of the day, with anything in regard to this, we don't know Dougie E enough. And maybe we should have seen more Dougie E. Or maybe having that mystery at the end is something where you're looking at this, you're looking at the weird reactions, and you're kind of having almost a Laura Palmer parallel where there's so many people around this person clearly needs help. It doesn't matter if there's minor differences or not. This person isn't masking it all too well. Someone help this man.
That's actually a very good point.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have no automatic rebuttal to that. Only thing I would say is it's played for comedy a lot more than Laura's ever was. So there's a little maybe of a question of, does that work or not? But I could see what you're saying of a parallel. I'd not thought of that way before. Also, like Laura Palmer,
call for help.
Dougie Coop has a sex life. And just like with Laura, it makes us very uncomfortable.
It does.
So
the character is smiling. The character smiles afterwards.
Yeah.
He parrots love you back. However, the entry into the scene being a fairly uninterested sort of Dougie Coop eating cake while this woman is trying to seduce him, leading into the seduction scene, which, by the way, I will mention, too, we finally got some male gazy things. We got to look at those sweet, sweet Dale Cooper ads. I'm going to give that it's a fair point to give.
Yes, it is a fair point to give.
I'm giving that point right over here. In the sexy scene, we see his arms flap around like a little...
So
even I'm laughing right now, but at the same time,
it's
there's
uncomfortable.
Still a layer of uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a really big stretch to try to take this scene down and argue that Janie E commits sexual assault. No, that's too drastic. However, I do think you can't discount immediately the uncomfortable vibes because there's a dissonance, right? There's an irony that we know as an audience, this is not her normal husband. This is not her normal husband's soul or mind because we saw him get orbed. Okay? So, like, there's that weird sense in which she believes that she is sleeping with her husband, and we know that's not quite the case.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that weird element where he does not vocalize any interest, any reciprocation. There is no verbal consent. The best you can say is he seems to like it. And that gets to be really dicey. We're talking about consent. So, like, it's uncomfortable, but also probably meant to be funny. On that note, when I was looking at the Twin Peaks wiki, the behind-the-scenes information, during the filming of Dougie Cooper and Janie E's sex scene, Kyle MacLachlan was only given the direction to lie down in the bed and more or less be passive. As it was being shot, his arms naturally began to bounce with the motions of the bed, and this prompted the director of photography to lean in and whisper, "Keep doing the arms. It's hilarious." So it wasn't scripted. Which I think is kind of important, though, because the main thing that's funny about this scene is the arms.
Yes.
And that was not in the script. In the script, he would have just been lying there, passive, not reacting.
Well, he is passive, not reacting. It's just that, thankfully, for the positions of the arms to show in the scope that he is there, the arm thing just ended up working out. Happy accidents are probably one of my favorite parts whenever making content myself, so the fact that it happened on the scene... I can see where it's fun. It's like, I like that. Let's keep it going.
I guess the thing that strikes me, though, is that if it had happened according to script, I think it'd be a lot less funny. It'd be a lot more uncomfortable.
I think it's still according to script. It's just like a happy circumstance with opposing, because that is a passive thing. If someone is bouncing on the bed, likely your arm's going to move.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean, though. If he was like comatose, not moving, it would feel worse. It would feel gross.
It could feel gross, yes.
I think the fact that his arms are moving comically lightens up the moment a lot.
It does.
So, I don't know. I think it's a curious thing. Again, what did David Lynch intend by this scene?
Mm-hmm.
What was the intention of this scene? Was it meant to be funny? originally, or did it just become funny? It's hard to say. I mean, in effect, it is mostly humorous. I remember when I watched it, I was with other people, and we had a good laugh about it. It's just kind of looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I feel as much anymore. There's also the idea going in my head, if we're trying to imagine the timelines, it's only been like 1 day, maybe 2, right, since Janie E found out about his affair.
Time is ever so funny. I've never been able to keep track of days in Twin Peaks.
But it feels like it's only been a day or 2. Based on like what we've seen transpire, not enough has really happened to indicate it's been more than that.
I have not thought about it personally. I'm trusting on your judgment on it.
Okay, well, how long do you think it feels?
It could feel anywhere between, if someone told me it was a few days, if someone told me it was a week, I'd believe in both responses. I'm not focusing on the time. I'm not looking at the clock. I am moving into the cozy covers that we got right here and just letting the dreamscape take me.
That's honestly probably the best way to enjoy everything. I can't do that myself right now, and it's hard for me. Again,
Understood.
My mind is going to how Janie had that line where she was like, "We're going to talk about this." Like, she was clearly, understandably upset that her husband had an affair.
Yes.
And then that just kind of goes away because he gave her a lot of money and he's hot. Like, here's the problem I'm experiencing right now, right? On the surface of everything, it is just a funny scene that shows Dougie having a good time with the sex. Clearly, Janie's having a good time. It's meant to be a good laugh. All is good. No problems. Under the surface, it kind of makes Janie E seem super superficial to me, because instead of actually confronting her husband about his infidelity, she just instead thinks, wow, he's actually hot now, and just sleeps with him. That's it. Like, I feel like there should be some comeuppance about the relationship angle.
In counter to that, using the red ruby slipper example as well, where she is actively wearing red shoes in the scene where she is getting into the vibes with Dougie, think about her life beforehand. She had a distant husband that was constantly cheating on her, was someone who did not care about his health, it would seem, and ended up gambling a bunch of money away. It was someone who was absolutely absent, at the very least, from the point that we got to. This version of Dougie Coop here is like a dream. This is like a physical embodiment of Oz right before her, because this is someone who seems to have taken care of himself. It seems that he is someone that is able to make up for past mistakes, and is now, I would say, they're at a more even point, other than a few conflicts going on their outside end, where they're thinking internally, wow, I survived a knife incident, and now Dougie is safe from that. We survived against these people who were after us because we were able to cash in our money, and now my son has college funds to keep moving forward. She's living in a dream at this time. A dream reality, just like Oz, and that's why there's red slippers on her before she fully engages herself in this embodiment of Oz. And I think it's a fair assessment to say, when you're found with a dream while living a nightmare for a while, it's fair to say that she embraces it.
Question for you. Strange question. If Dougie Coop is a figure of Oz, and we know that the Scarecrow was missing a brain, that the Tin Man was missing a heart, and the Lion was missing courage, although all three found that they actually had it all along, or obtained it by the end, what is Dougie Coop missing?
At this point, I don't know. It's not like the absence of courage creates cowardice, but instead the absence of courage just creates more absentness with him. I think he's missing all of those at this time. He is just something that echoes and reflects desires or wishes of the people around him at this time. So Dougie very much is what he needs to be in that moment. Similar to, if we take Wizard of Oz, or even by extension other Oz tales such as Return to Oz, it was a reflection of what Dorothy needed at the time. That's happening with his boss. That's happening with Janie E. Who else will Dougie come across in which he just so happens to be ideal for?
Kalil and the Unplugged Professor would like to take this time to recommend to you, the listener, the film Return to Oz. This is a film that is often considered a cult classic. It is a continuation and an adaptation of the books far more than the 1939 film, but it does pay a certain strange homage to it, in the sense that it is like the darker, more twisted psychological cousin, one could say, of the original film. And I have no freaking idea if David Lynch has seen this movie. I have to wonder, because you've got Return to Oz, and now the Twin Peaks The Return, and everything's not what it used to be, and you can't go back. The yellow brick road has been torn asunder. But no, it's actually a pretty good movie, and if you have Disney Plus and you support the mouse corporately, you can go and indulge in it. You're already paying Michael enough anyway. You might as well.
You wear the ears, you might as well listen.
You might as well listen. Duncan Todd, Anthony Sinclair get a couple interactions. Well, I should say Duncan Todd gets a couple interactions because he's called by Mr. C, who asks for an update on an important job. I'm presuming killing Dougie is that important job.
Seeing as, like, the last contact he ended up answering led up to the hit envelope that was given to Ike the Spike, and now with the follow-up, especially with what's happening with Ike Spike being called, it's like, oh no.
And this is around the time that Mr. C is with Hutch and Chantal, and they're going to go kill Warden Murphy. Again, a lot of establishments of people needing to kill someone else get the job done, dang it. And then Duncan Todd, after having that conversation, or around the time having that conversation, ends up speaking with Anthony Sinclair, the insurance man that Dougie works with.
And by the gods, is it a nice moment of tension for this guy to really come off as a great corporate villain. It's where he is quickly, every time like Anthony just tries to present himself or defend himself, is quickly just shut down right off the bat. He is given straightforward information being like, okay, you are going to have to go over to the Mitchell brothers. You're going to have to convince them that Dougie was the one handling these things just so that he has a target on his head. Or elsewise, Anthony, you're going to need all your creativity in a basket because elsewise you will have to kill Dougie yourself. I'm saying it in paraphrased form, but he's very much... He may be sitting down before Anthony, but by the gods is he in a pedestal looking down on him.
I think this would fire against a lot of what we learned in parts 9 and 10, fire against some earlier theories and wonderings you've had. There's still ways around it. There's still ways to circumnavigate it because Twin Peaks, again, time is weird, reality's weird. But it does imply strongly that the man that Duncan Todd said that, you don't want to work with anyone ever like this, don't want to meet anyone ever like this, was Mr. C. And that if Mr. C is on the phone with him at the same time that Dougie is around in South Dakota, it would imply that they are two separate people.
It would imply. I think it comes with the first theory that I had in which, like, Mr. C was the big person there, and also Mr. C is likely the person funding the glass boxing, as one of the earliest photos has Mr. C literally at the glass box talking to other individuals, likely trying to get things set up. It looks for the most part, Mr. C has been setting up for likely Dougie Coop's arrival and also execution because he's not done being out here right now. He has too much planned.
This is again where I think the Occam's razor most obvious solution kind of wins at the moment.
Yes.
Is that Dale Cooper went through the socket, went into Dougie's body. The real Dougie got sent to the Red Room, got orbed. And meanwhile, the person masquerading as Dougie, who you're calling Dougie Coop, is seemingly Dale Cooper, right?
Yes.
And that is why Mr. C would want to kill him, because you don't want that man alive. One of them must die.
Yes,
and according to the one-armed man.
It seems more likely one's going to die more than the other, thanks to Part 8.
Yeah, Part 8, well, we haven't seen, to be fair, we saw Dougie dismantle like the Spike. We haven't seen anyone shoot Dougie yet. Maybe the bullet repels off and fires back at the person who shot them. You don't know how strong Dougie is.
Maybe some Red Room attendants just sort of like saunter over and start digging in his organs to make sure that the wound is in a spot that doesn't hurt too much. Mm-hmm. Just like, if you just like have a bunch of like old people come out of the woodwork and just dig into your organs and just move them around and eventually get into a spot that things work again, like that's a great resource to have, I think.
I would also say that given the shirtless abs scene we get with Dougie Coop, I will say that most likely he is in, equal, if not better looking shape than Mr. C, this greasy, slimy man with a hunch step.
I don't know. It might just be like the same thing, but without a shower. So maybe there might be like a lot of things packed in there.
Maybe. It really just tells you the importance of good hygiene. You could be in great shape and have all, your faculties there. But, if you don't take a shower and you don't dress up for the occasion, what would Mike Nelson say at the interview if Mr. C showed up at the interview looking like that?
I think that
he would not get the job.
I think he would understand if he knew that sometimes the coal miners will come out of the woodwork to rub blood on you. And sometimes you think to yourself, what the hell? Like, yeah, what's the point?
Might
happen again soon.
I really want to imagine a scenario in which Mike Nelson is job interviewing Mr. C. Like, it's a very funny idea. Like, so Mr. C, it says on the paperwork here. Tell me why I should hire you. Why do you need this job more than others?
You imitate human behavior quite well.
Well, I was trying to feed you into the line of, I don't need this job. I want this job.
That's fine. That's your version of Mr. C. I just think that he just shoots everyone he sees.
He just shoots everyone.
Every single one.
Okay. Okay, well, that's fair, I guess. Candy seems to swat everyone she sees with controllers. I think the Mitchum Brothers sections in Part 9 and 10 are some of the best parts in Part 9 or 10.
I think that the Mitchum Brothers are a heavily enjoyable part of this show.
Solid performances from those two, solid performances from Candy, as well as the writing and comedic timing. They manage to be multiple emotions at the same time, which is something that a lot of times peak David Lynch material accomplishes.
Yes.
They are simultaneously comedic relief, but also threats. And it works. It's hard to do that balance right, but I think it's working because they are imposing, but also they're kind of wholesome. You know what I mean? Like, they will definitely kill people and hire hits, and they are terrible, shady men. But at the same time, you can't help but root for them, right?
You can't help but root for them because they're trying their best.
They really are trying their best.
Like, as opposing forces, I will even contest them against Mr. C. Mr. C seems to be an unstoppable force, seems to be involved with a lot of mythical natures, and still seem to be quite threatening. But I can't help but kind of indulge with the absolute fun coming off of the Mitchum Brothers. I'm looking forward to seeing more Mitchum Brothers content as much as I'm looking forward to seeing more Mr. C content.
I'm not quite at that level myself, but I think both are very fun. Both are very fun in different ways.
Yes. They're different flavors of ice cream.
I would say that Mr. C is gelato.
I think...
And I will not elaborate.
No. Mr. C is Rocky Road. And then as you eat the ice cream, you then play the music.
Is that the American Woman remix?
Yeah, it's the American Woman remix. It's as you down the Rocky Road ice cream. Meanwhile, I think maybe there's a Neapolitan flair with the Mitchum Brothers.
I know you're trying to do the American Woman, but it sounds a bit more like... Perfect. I also want to mention, when I was looking at the Twin Peaks wiki, that apparently the scene where Candy's trying to swat the fly and ends up hitting Rodney Mitchum in the head, that was unscripted. And the reason it even exists is it's a byproduct of an actual on-set accident that occurred where the actor for Rodney Mitchum, Robert Nepper, ended up actually getting hit by a light that fell. And so David Lynch made up this scene kind of last minute or, on the day of the shoot to explain where the real cut came from. And I bring that up just to preface, one, David Lynch is really good at improvising, but then two, one of the funniest, most energetic favorite scenes I've had in The Return so far wasn't in the script. It was just a thing that had to happen to explain something, which again makes me feel like, wow, we wouldn't have had this moment if it hadn't been for freak accidents.
Fun freak accidents are one of the best parts of putting media together, I would say. I think that from what I see from background material, even for small comedy skets, the most surprising thing is everything goes according to plan. And the fact that they're able to adapt with it, the fact that the framing works very well on the side of the wound is never in the focus. It's very commendable. I love the scene, and I think that it deserves that commendation.
Now here's the thing. I don't want to wish more people to have accidents. Obviously, that's not good.
No!
But I will say this. Part of me wants to tacitly put forward the idea that maybe part of what's lacking for me in the fun department of The Return is a result, either directly or indirectly, of David Lynch having so much control. Because happy accidents are more likely to occur when you're being put through weird situations, pressures, loopholes, problems, the kinds of things that happened in syndicated television of the 90s, where you're working on a pretty last-minute schedule with all these different writers and directors. You're more likely to encounter weird situations that have to have weird solutions. Whereas The Return, because it was all scripted out, it was all planned out, it was all released when it was done, I wonder if it invited less weird opportunities for things to need problem solving.
That, of course, leads into mystery, and maybe David Lynch has actually expanded upon it, and Mark Frost has already made multiple notes on it. But it is a series of productions that David Lynch went for a tone and likely succeeded at. What David Lynch finds as fun, that's a relative notion. But if we are to put into the most I would say, general term of fun. We know that David Lynch has done things such as Wild at Heart before, something that is very light in that tone. It's just not here. The Return is a different beast.
Mm-hmm. And the other moment, I guess, with the Mitchell brothers and Candy that stands out to me especially is when they ask Candy to go get Anthony from down in the main lobby of the casino, and she takes her sweet time getting distracted, talking about the weather and the zones that they're in. And it establishes a few things. I mean, the main thing that it kind of struck me is how much Candy seems to be in her own world. That when she's against the wall with the other two women, it seems like they are in their own realm of thought. They're not even on the same frequency as everyone else. And then the use of the phrase like the zone of the weather makes me think, of course, of the search for the zone, the mauve zone. It could just be playing a familiar word, but it is rather suspicious how much Candy seems to have like simultaneously a clairvoyance, but also an absent-mindedness.
I don't know about clairvoyance. For the most part, I think it's just adding to the tone of the place that they're at, because she acknowledges that everything coming in, she's very thankful the establishment has air conditioning. I think that she's glad that she has these comforts around her, and that is one of the main points in focus. And sure, she may be a little bit more distant herself and focusing out into the background, but I think that that's just excellent characterization and something that both the other opposing actors of the Mitchum brothers are able to bounce off of very nicely, that blends the means of the serious and the comedic tone. I love the fact that we've constantly seen Candy, and Candy is especially emphasized between Candy, it's all right, trying to make sure Candy knows, Candy can't hear those words, is pushing aside the other individuals of her trio and asks, how can you even love me? Before later on, one of the Mitchum brothers acknowledges, hey, no, we can't do anything about this, like, if we let her go, like, where's she gonna go? Like, there's a deep care at the very least from the Mitchum brothers that acknowledges if they don't have a chance to go somewhere and they end up growing close to these people, like, what are we gonna do now? So it complicates things for the Mitchum brothers, especially since what we've seen happen to the other boss, and then also compounds it with their environment of someone like Candy being around there, that I think makes all these instances all the more juicy.
I would also mention the music, because when I think of those scenes, I'm kind of remembering now they had a little more music than a lot of other parts in The Return, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah, because like the build-up with the fly thing had some audio going on.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like the music would be nice to have. Speaking of music, speaking of familiar moods, Town of Twin Peaks.
Yes, the Town of Twin Peaks.
Probably where the most is happening in these two parts.
We are returning back to the Twin Peaks because we need to kind of work a few things out, especially with
furniture.
Yep, the chair.
But chair. I already established the red chair looks better. You gave me some weird answer that didn't answer the question, so I'm going to say unanimously 2-0, the red chair looks better than the beige. I want to know, did you like the scene with Andy and Lucy deciding the chairs?
No.
Cool. We can move on from that?
It's a fun moment where we see Lucy is playing some form of 5D chess with Andy, trying to make sure it's clear that she prefers this chair so that Andy can give up this chair so that she can cement the surprise that he's getting the chair that he wants. But for the most part, it just adds a singular quirk over a period of a few minutes in which I can see you already shaking your head and dreading.
I'm mostly just keeping myself completely still and then rocking my whole entire body violently.
Oh, that's how but you have to stay still or else the dinosaurs get you.
Bobby has better moments here. I'm going to give Dana Ashbrook, the actor, a lot of the credit for it. I think that he's able to carry a lot of emotion in. He's definitely the character from the original show who's returned, who shows the most connectivity to the original character. Yes. And then it feels like a growth. It feels like a natural evolution of the character. It doesn't feel like it could have been anyone else like Jacoby. It feels like, no, this definitely needed to be Bobby. There is a character arc that's being continued growth-wise. It wasn't just that like time stopped and then 25 years later we're the same place we were before. No, this actually is an interesting development. And I think that a lot of the situations that he's in allow him to be more emotional, nostalgic, which again plays into that connection. I think a lot of it works. We get him getting the object inside of the chair. We talked about that earlier. And they go and take it to the police department, only for Chad to be eating in the conference room. I enjoy the Chad scene. I enjoy how he has to take so long to leave, how he can't get the door, even though he totally could get the door. And it's just so good. It's really good. But the humorous thing about it, though, is that they go in there, they have to kick Chad out. It takes longer for Chad to leave than how long they actually spend in that conference room because they realize very quickly that they need to go actually outside again to open the thing.
Not they, Bobby.
Bobby
is
of
the
course.
one who ends up laughing at them and says, nah, I know about this. My dad showed it to me. Here, I'll show you how to do it. We have to go all the way outside.
And
literally take him through a run. I think that works, especially like bouncing off other characters. It's very good for Bobby. Bobby throws the thing at the bottom. It ends up vibrating, lets him hear the vibration, panic onto it, until something clicks in the mechanism, likely something's moving around, twisting until it reaches to a stop at the lock point, and then throws it again so that it actually breaks the mechanism.
Now, the actual message, we get two slips of paper. One is the Cooper line, with the third Cooper noticeably cut off around the halfway point.
Two Coopers.
Basically, we're saying is that after the return is done, we're going to get a spin-off of the CBS hit comedy 2.5 Men, 2.5 Coopers.
Would you watch a show that's 2.5 Coopers?
We already are.
We
already are watching that show.
In a sitcom environment. Like, they're all together.
Honestly, after the return, I would try most other formats just to see what it's like. Maybe I'm not a fan of 2.5 Men. I thought the show was not really good when I watched it when I was younger. And I wasn't even watching it by choice. Family was watching it, and I was in there. Anyway, I would try anything to break up this format, so maybe I would give it a shot. The other slip has a bit more pertinent information. It mentions the 253 number, because of course it does. And then it mentions Jackrabbit's Palace is where they need to be going in a few days. And of course, Bobby has to explain to them that Jackrabbit's Palace was an imaginary place that he and his father would go to when he was a kid. I think that's very cute. It's very sweet. It's great development for their backstory, even though we are told about it, not shown. Jackrabbit's Palace, Jackrabbit, rabbits. One of these days, I'm going to tell you what's going on. Rabbits.
I feel like you're trying to tell me something.
Naomi
Kalil.
Watts is one of them.
I think
Scott Coffee! Scott Coffee!
For those who may have missed out on to our David Lynch pieces, yet another large emphasis could be the usage of David Lynch's work with rabbits here.
Yes. Now, I don't think it means much beyond just the name similarity. I more get the idea of like an Alice in Wonderland vibe out of it, which is interesting because typically speaking, when we're talking dream worlds, it's Oz. It's very heavy Oz throughout David Lynch's work. But I am curious about the use of the rabbit with a mystical place, an unknown place. We'll have to keep our eyes out for any Alices or any Red Queens.
Or them going into giant holes in the ground.
I'm also thinking of the card that Mr. C showed as being a playing card, and I'm like,
yeah.
There's a lot of poker cards. We got the nursery rhyme that happened with Mr. C over the phone. There's something to this childhood idea of dreams and home that seems to continuously linger and work around. And of course, Oz is the forefront, but I don't want to exclude other possibilities of connection. Other things we can possibly connect it to and wonder about and where it's going. So with that being said, let's return home to Twin Peaks again to Richard Horne, who's truly a lost child.
He is not a lost child. He's a freaking hurricane. This is probably the closest thing that we see, but also is so much better emphasized as a Leo Johnson figure.
Yeah, he's a new and improved Leo Johnson.
He is. He is someone that when he sees a threat and he just comes off to try to like yell, it's like, hey, I need to talk to you, Miriam. When he literally goes to her home, she threatens, hey, I've already called the police. I've told them. I've sent a letter. There's extra support behind it. People need to know what you've done.
And again, I thought the running over the child in that previous episode was not the greatest handled. I haven't had those issues with occurrences in parts 9 and 10. I thought that his assault on Miriam and his assault of his grandmother and presumably then his uncle, Johnny, that was much more effective because it's so visceral, so raw. It doesn't feel like we're shoehorning in a random moment just to evoke emotional manipulation. No, this is legitimately haunting behavior.
They lean into the intensity, the very personal nature of it, and the abruptness.
And I think this is where the no music actually helps. This is where I, like, in the terms of the Miriam attack, I thought the no music made it hit much more hard than if we had the music. And then, weirdly enough, we get music with the Johnny and Sylvia thing, but it isn't like scary, intense music. It is this, just for a moment, just the music. It's like this very like dreamy, whimsical, kind of uplifting sort of music that completely contrasts the mood. And I think that works.
Yes, the music
Now,
does.
Professor, how are you today?
Hello, Johnny. How are you today?
I told you.
Hello, Johnny. How are you today?
I told you Dumbland would pay off.
Hello, Johnny. How are you today?
And guess what?
Hello, Johnny.
My teeth are bleeding. My teeth are bleeding.
Hello, Johnny. How are you doing today?
So,
it goes on for some. Why would you give? Like, how is this helping anybody or coaxing anybody?
I think you can kind of interpret from the background. We don't get much of it right now, but it doesn't seem like Sylvia really knows how to help Johnny.
She gives him a nightmare teddy bear with a spear head.
Even before that, though, like, that was what she was shouting, presumably to someone who was at the house, that why'd you let him out? Like, basically, Johnny is cooped up in his room. The moment he gets out, he starts running around, rams himself into a picture of the falls of Twin Peaks. And he
breaks a lamp, by the way, electricity,
waterfalls, a lot of symbology, but it doesn't seem like Johnny is really being helped. He's more just kind of being cooped away.
He is suffering. He is looking straight into this doll, and I do not see any point of, like, coaxing joy or anything other than I am trapped here. And I am sitting in front of this creature, and no one is helping me.
And we know that Johnny enjoys conversation because of what we're told in the secret diary, that he and Laura were very close. Like, genuinely, Laura could confide in him and he wouldn't judge, and he did respond. So to see Johnny non-respondent having a one-way conversation with a electronic light bulb bear thing
with a face,
with a Dumbland face, to me it's like a very dark perversion of Laura Palmer, where Laura Palmer was also represented by a glowing orb recently, but she wasn't crudely drawn with a weird face and forced in front of someone as a means of distraction. I don't know. Again, I think there's something to it that Johnny genuinely seemed to be helped by attention, conversation, trust, relationships, and instead of an actual relationship, you've given him this obnoxious thing. And all we can really do is extrapolate from these one or two scenes we get. They just tell a story on their own. Maybe there's more context. Maybe Sylvia is taking him around town all the time. I'm just skeptical based on what we saw so far.
The current context shows that likely Johnny is currently suffering in a place without music, without Laura, and without anything really to, I would say, help him in this instance. His only means of runaway and escape ended up with a means of crashing because there's no way of going back to where he is. Where else would he go? And Johnny is trapped.
But genuinely, I would say that this has been one of the most effective scenes I have ever seen in a piece of media showing essentially domestic violence. Because there is the absurd element of the Hello, Johnny, how are you today in the music, but I think it kind of works to show that in the background, there's this background noise, and it's like not necessarily like eerie or ominous. It's not trying to play up any of the emotions in like a contrived way. It's more just that like there's this, I almost think of like a background television noise or like a background sound that, you know, gets recontextualized by the violence that we're seeing before us. I don't know. I think it just feels so brutal and real. And genuinely scary in a way that we don't get all the time. I mean, again, even think of Leo Johnson and Shelley. This is where I think the music approach is very different. Leo Johnson a lot of times got these more menacing, scary tracks.
And this isn't the only one where like things get really intense with characters like this. Like the biggest example, like we're already bringing up Leo Johnson. I think a big parallel that comes up is Stephen and Becky in this, where we are at the nearby trailer parks where we do have Carl Rod sort of like sitting idly by, playing on his guitar a sweet melody and having to forcibly ignore domestic abuse happening right across from his trailer as a mug flies out because he probably feels powerless. He's probably more of a powerless figure than the log lady and must idly stand by and just let things be. Because within there, we have Stephen shouting into her face, making threats under this very darkened tone. We know with his uses of drugs in the past, and likely this domestic abuse is going to be more in that relationship angle that Leo's and Shelley's was.
Yeah, it feels less fictionalized and more real in the return.
It's almost as if they split the intentions of Leo Johnson into two separate characters. This side for the relationship, this side for the chaos that happens around during some drug dealing business. So
yes, and I think it works. I think it genuinely works, and I think that especially with Richard, it's genuinely a really good performance.
You thought that it might be better if we get rid of a Leo Johnson with a tarantula. I say we multiply Leo Johnsons and put them across the town.
Isn't it dividing?
Dividing, multiplying, whatever. At the end of the day, there's more! Yay!
There's more! I was talking to you again off pod about, like, if you were to imagine all of the characters in Twin Peaks, all from the original show and all from The Return and Fire Walk with Me, and you'd imagine like a seated bracket in terms of like who's a good character, however you want to judge that. And a lot of the characters in The Return, I just think would lose out to characters in the original for me personally. Mm-hmm. Richard Horn is one of the exceptions where he would beat out people like Leo Johnson. He would beat out a lot of the characters in the original show, even just based on the little bit of screen time we have, because I think the actor does such a good job, and I think because the moments feel so real. And this is where, part of me wishes that media became more normalized to maybe put some content warnings, but then I also do understand that you don't want to spoil what's going to happen, but I could imagine the stuff with Richard Horn legitimately being upsetting to someone in a way that maybe Leo Johnson's might have been less likely to.
Yeah.
With the Horn family, we also get the brothers Horn a bit more in here. Sylvia calls Ben to ask for the money basically back that Richard had stolen, and Ben is like, nope, not doing that anymore, Sylvia, not sending you any more money.
And meanwhile, Sylvia is just saying, like, no, I'm getting my lawyer. So it sounds like Ben is already conceding, realizing that, like, this is going to be happening after hanging up the phone. Earlier on, him as well as Beverly were getting a little bit close, and he tried to push her away, saying that I can't do this. And she says, you're a good man, Ben. At this point, he has receded into it and has said, Beverly, would you like some dinner tonight? As like, on full display, I think that shot especially emphasizes the wedding ring on his hand to show that, hey, this is still happening with him.
Well, and do you read the wedding wing? Is that the wedding wing? Oh, my God. Is that the wedding ring then with Sylvia? Is he still, like...
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Or do you think they're still married? They're divorced, right?
I think they're still married because
just
probably
separated?
Ben has just separated because Ben has so many assets at this point that having a separation would probably be very overtly complicated between the two of them.
Maybe. I think it's interesting also because I look at this as a situation with no good guys and bad guys type of thing, where I don't think that Ben or Sylvia, either one is right, because Sylvia just legitimately got robbed, and it's not like she should lose out on the money, but then also, like, why does Ben have to pay for it? Like, neither one of these really should be the one paying for this at all. It's not something that Ben should be responsible for. And then also I'm wondering, okay, did Sylvia report this to the police? We don't know yet. And also, where's Audrey? Because that's the elephant in the room, right? Yeah. Where if this is the child of Audrey, presumably, right? Why did she go to Ben? Mm-hmm. It could be Johnny. I'm just saying the fact that she went to Ben directly and not to Audrey is, I think, doesn't give us the answer, but it does lead us to question, if it is Audrey's daughter, why not go to Audrey first?
Because she has to be focusing on the finances she has. If her whole purse and her safe has been taken out of, she has to take care of Johnny. She has to be taking care of Johnny, probably
which would be
some
Ben's,
additional assistance outside.
Ben's area,
which is
his
Ben's
child.
area. So, yeah. Contacting Ben first and foremost and trying to make sure that that's in order, then coming into conflict with Ben when, I have nothing now and I'm taking care of Johnny, and Ben says no. Like, at that point, well, even if the police do start this, there's no chance, there might be no chance I get that money back, or there's might not be any chance I'm able to help Johnny right off the bat, so I've got to get my lawyer now. So it's one of those points where you kind of see an emphasis on both sides, right. But at the same time, these are just two very miserable people.
Yeah,
that are
it's not a good guy, bad guy situation. It's just a tough situation that they're both in. Obviously, the most important scene in parts 9 and 10 combined is Jerry Horn in the woods. High, lost, no cell phone service, and he's hearing a voice come from what is not his foot. I am not your foot.
It's slowly becoming part of the Red Room, Kalil. Aren't you excited to have Jerry Horn as a part of a Red Room attendant? He's slowly transforming, and that's good for him.
According to a 25 years later website interview with David Patrick Kelly, the actor for Jerry Horn, I just read this through the Twin Peaks wiki, which cited that source. Apparently, this is not a known performer. We don't know who says, I am not your foot. It was not the actor who played Jerry. Someone else voiced the line, I am not your foot. Thought you should know that.
So you're saying it wasn't actually his foot talking?
I'm saying it wasn't him. A question for you, Professor.
Yes.
If your foot was talking,
Yes.
would it have your voice?
No.
What voice would it have? Okay, who's the voice actor for that?
My foot.
You just did it, though.
You
just made that sound, so
but it's
you
gonna come out of my foot's mouth. I can make a Kalil impression right now, but the thing is, I'm not you. I'm me. And my foot is its own independent body that just so happens to be leeched on.
Your foot is not an independent body. It's part of your body.
But almost as if like a backpack. And if you have a child in the backpack, that's not you. That's a child in a backpack.
Make sure the zipper's open. So what is going on here? How important, like on a sliding scale of like 1, it doesn't matter at all, 10 being it is actually a crucial moment. What do you think is the sliding scale importance number?
You literally split the piece in 2 pieces and put them on opposite scales. Genuinely.
How important?
Because the reason why it's like on 1 and 10 at the same time is because if it is information that we are gaining for, say, for example, Limbs speaking out, him being lost in the woods, those being very important parallels and plus mythical things going on, in which eventually we'll have to go to the woods in order to try to figure out things with the Red Room. Like, if it's that case, that's a number 10 on the scale. That means that something's happening with Jerry that will probably bleed into that Red Room style, probably bleed into something mythical going on, probably bleed into things that the other characters will go into. On the other end, on the 1 scale, if he's just high as hell and he's just gonna be wandering through here, this isn't important at all. This is just a funny moment with Jerry just wandering of what the hell is going on with him.
Which one do you think it is?
I don't know.
If you had to throw, you have to bet on one side. Which one do you bet on?
Cool. I'm gonna flip a coin.
Okay, flip a coin.
Heads, tails. I didn't even decide which one was tails, so I'm gonna go with the second one. It's fake.
It's fake?
He's
you heard it here,
super
folks.
high.
You heard it here.
I said 50-50 chance, and the coin said so.
Rounding out the rest of the Twin Peaks situations that are maybe worth noting here, Nadine is watching Dr. Amp. He's doing about the same thing as before.
These things are bad, and that's why you need to do what you can to go against the bad people.
But we do see that she is not just a loyal listener and watcher. She also has purchased a golden shovel, which is on display at the Run Silent, Run Drapes outside window.
It looks like she has signage on the front end. Her house looks very nice. The interior of the house looks nice. She looks like she is dressed up and well off. We haven't seen Ed yet, but she is absolutely admiring the ever-loving hells out of Dr. Amp.
How many hells are there?
As many as there needs to be.
How many do there need to be?
As many as I want.
How many do you want there to be?
At least 3 to 7.
At least 7 or at least 3
3
maximum
to
of 7? 8 would be too much.
8 would be too much.
Okay.
Maybe 9 we can compromise with, but 8 is just not going to work for me.
Okay.
But she's admiring him, and it looks like she's well off. If we use the information from the Secret History of Twin Peaks, we can regard that her past with her father on how he ended up being a successful inventor, and that helped her life. She's probably could become a successful inventor too, but I don't know if she has anyone to pass that down to now. I think that there is that sense of legacy going down within Twin Peaks, but the next stage of that, I don't know if it is even possible. Nadine may be at the end, and she's living a whimsical ending.
It appears that there are 9 layers of hell in Dante's Inferno. That's more than 7?
That's more than 7, but I could compromise with 9.
Okay.
Just not 8.
Okay.
Or 10 or beyond.
11?
11? I'll get back to you on that.
Get back to me on that. Cool. At the Roadhouse, please tell me you have a very strong answer for what Ella and Chloe, that's the characters according to the credits, Ella and Chloe, they're talking about being fired for being high from the local burger place. They talk about the terrible rash in her armpit. They talk about zebra. They talk about, have you seen that penguin? Ha 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 ha. Please tell me what is going on here.
So they're talking about a penguin and a zebra at the beginning and end conversations that are referencing individuals that happen to know inside their life.
The penguin, not necessarily. It just says, have you seen that penguin?
That penguin, a majority of penguins are emphasized in common culture as a creature that is black and white. If you had to give a list of creatures that are black and white, usually on top of that list
yes,
would be these creatures. So talking about blatant people that they already have preconceived notions on and ideas on, very black and white opinions on. They're using literal animals to compare with those black and white natures. So at that point, they are already secured on an idea and opinion. They seem to be unwavering individuals. The constant usage of the rash that is constantly being itched at, something beyond the surface that people are trying to get to but can't get beyond because it's just that feeling that will just be evoked in the air, and the fact that that rash exists, the fact that she was high, and the fact that she can't keep track of things could just be continued existence of showing, hey, those designer drugs that were coming down from Canada from beforehand, it's being spread out even further. It seems to be in a fair amount of hands of the youth around here and continues to sort of like beckoning it further. This character may come back or may not come back in the respects of depending on which burger joint it is. For our time in Snoqualmie Falls, there was no burger joint across the street. There was the theater across the street from the Double R Diner. But in the fiction, as much as anything can be across the street from one another, there may very well be one in which, was she fired from the Double R? Was she fired from this other establishment? Is this some other burger joint across town? That, I feel, matters less unless we're going to get like a follow-up later on. But for the time being, the usage of drugs, the usage of something beyond the surface that can't go beyond, and the uses of the stubbornness are effective on painting colors onto individuals in Twin Peaks that may exist in the background, more than the gasping people around the dead boy body.
While we're in the Roadhouse, we have 2 songs to talk about.
Yes.
One is A Violent Yet Flammable World by Au Revoir Simone. This is the second Au Revoir Simone song we've gotten in the series. I'm going to go through some of the lyrics with you, freeball some responses we go through. This first one's got quite a lot of lyrics, so if you find that you don't have much to say, you could just say a few words and we'll move on.
Yes, it seems that, if I'm not mistaken, this one had a fair amount of both of them had a fair amount of repetition.
The second one, far more.
Yes.
This first one's the longest song I think we've had so far with new content.
Very well.
So, oceans shape the sides, touching down in the spaces, soaking from a warm goodbye, an early rise offers kindly.
It's just a nice, comfortable image that is conceivable, if you will. It's something comfortable to look at. You understand how it works. You understand its dimensions and how it fits. It's a comfortable sight.
Tonight I sleep to dream of a place that's calling me. It is always just a dream. Still I cannot forget what I have seen.
The wavers between reality and dream, and how something is compelling within that dream.
The crowd's hard to believe. At their faces I'm looking, but your feet I'm following in soft steps on a path the way you lead.
It's something where they are comparing a predestined path by this sort of dreamed-like reality that they feel that they may very well follow. They're falling in line into something very similar to the waves introduced in the earlier stanza.
I don't want to lose myself. It's a whisper. It's a funny thing. We fold like icicles on paper shelves. It's a pity to appear this way.
It's a siren song going on.
Who is the siren?
Who's the siren? Not sure in this context.
Is it the I? Is it the you? Is it the we? Who is the siren in the song?
I'm unsure yet. I think that I don't have a idea towards it other than the concept of the dreamlike scape itself. The dream itself is compelling.
This one's a shorter lyric. It says, "You're flying when your foreign eyes trace the heights of the city."
You feel more compelled and excited when you see something unfamiliar to you. You are the foreign eyes looking down and sort of tracing the path. So it makes it more beautiful the less you recognize it.
Steaming with rocks and clouds we breathe, violent skies, a shock to my own body. Speech is wild, alive, sacred, and sounding, wild from across and beyond, oh, far beyond.
At this point, it seems that things are intensifying inside the song, or at the very least the story within the song.
Then the ending part here, hold on, I swear I saw it somewhere, waving, waiting, 1, 2, 3, above the wakes that follow.
It seems that there's something in the distance. The individual inside the song is asking for something to wait as something is going on way off in the background and trying to be compelled, while it seems that the character inside of this song is trying to catch up.
So when you think of these song lyrics for this first one, do you connect it to Twin Peaks?
I do connect it to Twin Peaks. I think that you can connect it either with independent characters such as Cooper sort of walking into the dream and trying to compel moving forward. But moreover, I think it's more of an audience sort of standpoint you can drop in something that's familiar, something you're trying to catch up on,
Sure.
and something that you would find more beautiful at first glance. But at the same time, it's not the same as what it will become. And at that point, you're just trying to catch up.
Sure. The next one from part 10 is No Stars by Rebecca Del Rio. Shout out to Moby on the guitar, by the way.
Moby on the guitar, fantastic.
Moby on the guitar.
Rebecca Del Rio, she has sung for David Lynch film
She
performances
was
before.
the voice in Mulholland Drive. She sang there at the theater.
Yes. It's great to see their theater as well as the lovely individual now reprising a role on a different stage in a chevron dress.
In a chevron dress with some electronic interference in this form of some auto-tuning that was happening in this particular version.
Yay.
With this song, there's a lot of repetition, and there's also like things being repeated in Spanish. I just have the English lyrics here, and again, a lot of it looks like there's a huge amount of lyrics, but when you actually break it down, it's just repeating a lot of the same ideas. It's definitely a long mood piece. I remember watching this with you, and you were just waiting for the credits to start, but the song just kept going because it's a very slow, long song.
It's a beautiful song. It's a
mood
stunning
piece.
song. But the hard part is that the framework that they use
Yep.
for performances in general,
Yes.
you're getting yourself ready to see the credits come
Because
up.
more
and then
often
they
than
don't.
not, that's been the case.
Which, honestly, you can call me incorrect.
You're incorrect.
But I would say that having the credits go at their usual pace and then just continue the performance afterwards, I think would have been much better, because at that point, I was kind of stuck between worlds where I was thinking to myself, wait, are we at the end of the episode? Is there something else
actually,
coming up?
I think you might have a point. Maybe I spoke too soon saying you're incorrect. It's almost like I should have listened to you first. No,
You're right.
It's good. It's good to judge.
Buckle
in advance.
down, double down.
Double down. So, lyrics, No Stars. My dream is to go to that place. You know the one where it all began.
Going back to someplace nostalgic.
I wonder what that could mean for the viewers.
Or whatever could it
Or
mean
characters.
for the viewers.
On a starry night when it all began, when we danced with the stars in our eyes, the night when it all began.
There was a beginning that you're remembering.
Yes. You said, hold me, don't be afraid, we're with the stars.
Making promises.
Then it just kind of repeats. That's
Repeat
it.
everything
Yeah,
that I said. Keep looping it again and
that's-
again and again and
And there's
again.
some Spanish parts, and that's
It's-
basically the song, yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful song, ballad, and it carries on. It is filled with weight. This is a very talented performer. I don't want my reactions to overshadow that.
It's okay. There's just not much really to say about that. But it's important to listen carefully to the sounds. Sounds. Oh, God, it reminds me of the sounds. Do you hear it, Professor? Do you hear it? I have the sound control now. I can make it whenever I want to. I can delay
And
this.
I don't hear it because you haven't pressed the button yet.
What was I supposed to say again?
The whoosh.
Oh, yeah. The whoosh counter. So, I didn't count any whooshes in part 9 or 10. There were 41 before, and there are still 41 whooshes.
How are you feeling about this whoosh counter
I'm
now? You were
feeling
very
like parts
excited.
9 and 10 were a letdown. I don't think this is a reflection on the whoosh counter being a bad idea. I think it's a reflection on the quality of parts 9 and 10. So I have one wonderful and strange question of the week for you. And it is strange. I couldn't think of anything interesting with this episode to ask you. No offense to, well, no, kind of some offense. I just don't have anything to ask you that we haven't already brought up.
Yes.
So I just went off the wall. I remember way back with one of our earlier podcasts, the original run of the show, we had this weird thing about like if you had to form like an RPG or D&D party out of characters, who would you bring? So I took a spin on that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're forming a team to journey to an unknown region of the world, like explorers. Like maybe you're going to go look for Atlantis or El Dorado or the center of the earth, like some fantastical place.
Yes.
Okay, you can bring 4 characters from the Return with you for your elite expedition team. Who are you bringing with you to search for hidden treasures, unexplored wonders, and mysteries of the world? 4 people, Return only. If they're characters who are returning, they're the age they are in the Return.
Okay, Deputy Hawk. We've seen nothing.
Debbie DeHawk?
Deputy Hawk.
Debbie DeHawk.
Deputy Hawk.
Okay.
Deputy Hawk is one of the most reliable people I've ever seen ever
Yep.
in any sort of
You
reality.
got a man in a pinch, he's
He
a pincher.
Literally, like anything that I need, like Deputy Hawk already has. And I probably only need that
He's a great tracker. He's good with an axe. Yeah.
But for some reason, you told me to pick 3 other people.
Yes.
So
for some reason.
So I've gone with Albert Rosenfeld.
Okay.
Someone who can probably see through things, see through facades, and is able to be very front force in nature with it. Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Ooh.
Just for the sake of any mythical help I might need, still seems to be a fairly guiding figure and seems to be someone who will help out more. It's very similar to the giant figure, whether or not there's other additional means. At this point, he's not a greasy Abraham Lincoln that's going to bust my head open at this point. So at the very least, like, there's some trust there. And then the last party member is the 9 Inch Nails.
That's not one person. You can bring Trent Reznor in, I guess.
It's like one of those like fun little accompaniments where you have multiple people in one.
Yeah.
Like it's like a net package. So the 9 Inch Nails for musical accompaniment for our journey.
But they play like all electric instruments, and you're like in the woods. Like, what are you gonna? Okay.
They're gonna have to really work that out themselves. That's not my job.
I never really listened to acoustic 9 Inch Nails. I'm curious how that sounds. You could rock Carl Rod. He would do music.
Carl Rod is going to watch as we die.
Yeah, he's already seen some tragedies, it seems, in his life. So what's one more, I guess, right?
No, I'd like to live.
We'll see if you live next time on Fix the Wonderful Exchange Logcast.
Thanks, Kalil.
We're talking about parts 11 and parts 12. Parts 11 is called There's Fire Where You're Going. And part 12 is called Let's Rock. Any expectations on those parts based on the titles and where we're at currently in the story?
Currently, I am processing as the proper Sam Stanley before I disappear into the void at the utterance of Let's Rock.
Oh, I didn't mean to hit that one. Dang it.
Now you know how it feels.